Several years ago, the kingdom of Pars, ruled by King Andragoras III, was renowned as the most powerful realm across Europe and Asia. During his reign, King Andragoras led his warriors into numerous battles, emerging victorious each time, solidifying his reputation as an unmatched leader. In the year 317, Pars' greatest rival, Lusitania, launched an invasion on the allied kingdom of Marium, intending to provoke Pars and lure them into battle. Upon hearing of this attack, Andragoras quickly mobilized a massive army of over 290,000 soldiers to confront the Lusitanians and reclaim Marium. The battle raged for hours, with Pars' forces displaying unmatched strength and determination. Ultimately, the Lusitanians were defeated, forced to their knees, as the Parsian army roared in triumph, celebrating their hard-won victory. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, the young crown prince of Pars, Arslan, was engaged in rigorous training with his father's trusted lieutenant, Varys. As usual, Varys pushed Arslan to his limits, refusing to go easy on him. Frustrated, Arslan expressed his complaints before wrapping up the session for the day. The two then discussed the qualities a ruler must possess. Arslan, a compassionate and kind-hearted boy, believed in a world without slavery and war, but Varys sternly reminded him that power was essential to rule effectively and earn the trust of the people. Arslan listened thoughtfully, thanked Varys for his wisdom, and then walked to the balcony overlooking the kingdom. From there, he gazed out at the soldiers and the bustling palace grounds. Spotting his mother nearby, Arslan tried to approach her, but she coldly ignored him and retreated to her chambers. Accepting her aloofness, Arslan wandered through the palace until he found solace in the company of his two cherished bird companions, Azriel and Sarush. He extended his hand, and Azriel gracefully landed on it. At that moment, Kishward, one of the kingdom's knights, entered the scene, making a playful remark about the birds, before bowing to deliver important news. Kneeling before Arslan, Kishward informed him of his father's triumphant return to the kingdom. In a triumphant moment, Andragoras and his military commanders receive a grand welcome from the townspeople upon their return from battle. Young boys among the crowd marvel at their passing warriors, dreaming of following in their footsteps. While they mock the captured prisoners of war, young Arslan approaches on horseback to welcome his father. Yet Andragoras dismisses him, continuing his slow procession toward the palace. Accompanied by a guard, Arslan wanders into different parts of town, eventually reaching the slave market where Lusitanian prisoners of war are being priced. Nearby, three mischievous children approach a young Lusitanian soldier's cell to frighten him. Unbeknownst to them, the captive has concealed a blade in his shoe. Breaking free, he grabs Arslan as a hostage and flees through the town square, evading the pursuing guards. Word of the crisis reaches Ryo, the kingdom's cavalry captain and Varys' nephew, who immediately abandons his duties to search for Arslan. Meanwhile, Arslan and his captor navigate through the city, leaping across rooftops and balconies. During their escape, Arslan saves the young soldier from falling off a balcony. A passing giraffe startles the Lusitanian boy, but Arslan reassures him of the creature's gentle nature. The young soldier persists in his attempt to escape the city. During their journey, Arslan shows the young soldier around Pars. Upon witnessing slavery in the kingdom, the Lusitanian boy expresses his outrage, explaining how his people condemn such practices. As they debate the differences between their kingdoms, the young soldier's passionate arguments lead Arslan to contemplate the concept that all humans are equal in the eyes of their creator. Finally reaching the city's south wall, the boy takes Arslan with him. Meanwhile, Andragoras visits the queen's chambers, hoping to find her in better spirits. However, he leaves frustrated by her continued cold demeanor. The young soldier, with Arslan still in his custody, leaps into the river below the south wall. Ryo arrives just in time to witness this, and draws his bow to target the escaping boy, who has mounted a stolen horse. Hearing Arslan's plea from below, Ryo intentionally misses his shot. After the commotion settles, he retrieves the prince. On their return to the palace, they encounter the three troublemakers who initially provoked the prisoner. Arslan, showing mercy, orders their release, believing in their innocence. Still pondering the Lusitanian boy's words, Arslan senses something amiss and hurries to check on the prisoners of war. He discovers they've been disposed of by slave traders who deemed them worthless. Riding back to the palace, he poses challenging questions to Ryo, who advises him to wait until he becomes king for the answers. Arslan makes lighthearted remarks about his father before safely returning home. 3 years pass, and Lusitania once again attacks the kingdom of Marium. Andragoras leads his army of 300,000 men, accompanied by 14-year-old Arslan on his first military campaign, a chance to prove his worth as the future king of Pars. Hours before the battle, Arslan loses another training session with Variz. A royal messenger arrives with urgent news from King Andragoras. War is imminent. The Kingdom of Pars mobilizes its forces to face Lusitania on the battlefield. Despite their smaller numbers, the Lusitanian army advances with unusual confidence, as if harboring a secret strategy. The Parsian army proceeds, dismissing any possibility of enemy traps. All 8 cavalry captains are summoned to ensure Lusitania's complete defeat. Captain Carlin explains the army's prowess to Arslan. When Azrael, the bird, returns from scouting with wet feathers, both Arslan and Carlan notice this detail. Carlan rushes forward to investigate, while Arslan sends Azrael back for another survey. A thick fog blankets the barren landscape. Arslan finds himself accompanied by the same 3 troublemakers from 3 years ago, now loyal soldiers who kneel before him. Vahriz appears, scolding Arslan for wandering too far. Before their proposed sparring match can begin, Vahriz is urgently summoned to the main camp regarding Darian's confrontation with the king. At the camp, Darian warns King Andragoras about a potential Lusitanian trap, suggesting betrayal within their ranks. The arrogant king dismisses these concerns, insulting both Darian and his friend Narcissus, the artist. Variz arrives just as tensions peak, striking his nephew for his insolence and begging the king's mercy. Andragoras allows Darian to prove his worth on the battlefield to maintain his position. After Darian's apology and departure, Arslan attempts to see his father but is promptly dismissed. Outside the royal tent, Daryun apologizes to Arslan for his earlier behavior. While watching the prince leave, Daryun expresses concern to his uncle about Andragoras's harsh treatment of Arslan. Vahriz silences him, warning against discussing royal family matters, but promises that one day Daryun might become the king's right-hand man. The battle horn sounds and the army prepares for combat. Carlin reports to Andragoras that the Lusitanian forces comprise 30,000 cavalry and 90,000 infantry. As scouts announce the enemy's advance, Andragoras raises his sword, delivers the blessing, and initiates the battle. Arslan joins his fellow Parsians in a thunderous battle cry. The Lusitanians patiently wait for their trap to unfold. When the Parsian army advances, 20,000 soldiers fall into an oil-filled pit. The Lusitanians then rain fire arrows upon them, incinerating all trapped soldiers. As the remaining Parsian forces press forward, they encounter another trap, a devastating arrow barrage that claims 3,000 more lives. In the ensuing chaos, the 3 former troublemakers fight valiantly to protect Arslan. Left alone, the prince faces his first real combat, successfully defeating a Lusitanian soldier. The reality of his first kill leaves him breathless as he searches for his father and Daryun. Nearby, Daryun swiftly dispatches 2 Lusitanians who were toying with Arslan's helmet. The battle takes a shocking turn when Carlin and his men surround Arslan, revealing their betrayal. Stunned by this treachery, Arslan attempts to fight, but is overwhelmed. Carlin, apologizing for his betrayal, reveals his plan to eliminate Andragoras's bloodline in the name of peace. Just as he prepares to strike Arslan down, Daryun arrives in time to save the young prince from the traitor's blade. As the battle rages, Lusitanian worshippers pray fervently for their army's victory. Before searching for Arslan, Daryun receives instructions from his uncle, who assigns him to protect the prince while he guards the king. Having found Arslan, Daryun must now fight through countless enemies to ensure the prince's survival. Carlan's betrayal suddenly becomes clear to Daryun. His earlier advice about reporting to the king was a calculated move to damage Daryun's reputation. With a smug expression, Carlan challenges Daryun to attack. After swiftly dispatching several Lusitanian soldiers, Daryun faces Carlan directly. Telling Arslan to remain calm, Daryun advances, but Carlan retreats immediately. Daryun then dismounts to attend to his prince. Meanwhile, King Andragoras faces a dire situation. Despite Vahriz's urgent advice to withdraw and preserve their forces, the king remains stubborn. Finally yielding to Vahriz's counsel, Andragoras orders the retreat signal. However, Carlan's hidden soldiers use the fog's cover to eliminate the hornbearer and spread rumors of the king's desertion. This deception devastates the army's morale. The soldiers, already struggling against the Lusitanian assault, begin to curse King Andragoras. Cavalry captains abandon their posts, and even Shapur's attempts to rally the troops prove futile as the Lusitanians press their attack with increasing intensity. As Vahriz and King Andragoras attempt to escape through a secret passage to Pars, they encounter a Lusitanian ambush. A barrage of arrows decimates the king's escort. The Lusitanian commander arrives to confront them personally. Vahriz fights valiantly, defeating several soldiers before facing the commander, who mockingly strikes him down with a single blow before defeating Andragoras as well. Meanwhile, Daryun secures a horse for Arslan and begins their journey to safety. They encounter a dying soldier who informs them of Shapur's death in battle, along with the king and Vahriz's demise. After the soldiers passing and paying respects, Daryun reveals to a shocked Arslan that his father actually cared for him, contrary to the prince's beliefs. Daryun decides they should seek refuge with his friend Narcissus, who lives outside Pars. The celebrating Lusitanian forces at their base camp are suddenly attacked by several thousand surviving Partian soldiers wielding fire. Despite the fierce assault, the Lusitanians eventually overcome and eliminate the remaining Parsian forces. Generals Montferrat and Boudin engage in philosophical discourse about war and death, their conversation interrupted by news of King Andragoras' assassination. As Arslan and Daryun journey toward Narcissus' home, Arslan inquires about him. Daryun explains that Narcissus was once highly regarded in Pars until his conflicting views led to banishment by Andragoras. Upon reaching the Forbidden Forest, Daryun mentions Narcissus' passion for painting. Their arrival is met with a warning arrow from Narcissus' servant, Elam. After Daryun's introduction, Elam guides them to the house where Narcissus awaits their arrival at the entrance. Narcissus warmly welcomes his old friend Daryun, and they exchange playful banter before Daryun introduces Arslan. As Elam prepares their meal, Arslan's first glimpse of Narcissus' artwork provokes an unmistakable reaction of shock and disgust. Over a delicious kebab dinner, Narcissus shares his remarkable history in Pars. He recounts a pivotal moment from 5 years ago, when 3 kingdoms, Sindura, Turan, and Turk, formed an alliance against Pars. King Andragoras dispatched Narcissus, his father, and 5,000 cavalry to face this threat. After losing his father and more than half his men, Narcissus returned to the palace with an unexpected announcement. He had freed his slaves and further reduced his forces. While senators and chiefs mockingly laughed, Narcissus made a bold request to face the alliance with his remaining men alone. The king, anticipating a plea for reinforcements, was stunned by Narcissus' confidence. 3 days after receiving permission, Narcissus returned and freed 2,000 prisoners of war, appearing to commit treason. However, his strategic brilliance soon became apparent. He had deliberately spread rumors of betrayal among the 3 kingdoms, using the freed prisoners as evidence to support these claims. His masterful manipulation resulted in the alliance's self-destruction as the kingdoms turned against each other, leaving Pars untouched. Arslan listens in amazement at Narcissus' ingenious strategy while continuing his meal. Narcissus then shifts the conversation to inquire about recent battlefield developments. Daryun reveals Carlin's betrayal to Narcissus, who, while impressed by Lusitania's tactics, prefers to avoid involvement. After some playful banter, Narcissus explains to Arslan that his father's refusal to abolish slavery led to their falling out. Later that night, over drinks, Daryun shares Vahriz's final instruction with Narcissus, to pledge loyalty exclusively to Arslan when the time comes. The next morning, Arslan finds Narcissus sketching the horizon and joins Elam in the kitchen, where he accidentally breaks some dishes. Elam shares his past as a former slave freed by Narcissus, explaining his choice to stay out of free will. This reminds Arslan of his encounter with the young Lusitanian soldier years ago. Their peace is interrupted when Carlin's soldiers arrive searching for Daryun and Arslan. Despite his initial protests about the trouble, Narcissus helps hide them in the attic. While questioning Narcissus, the soldiers reveal Vahriz's death, causing Daryun to inadvertently make a sound. The soldiers grow suspicious and offer Narcissus a position in Carlin's army, promising to restore his status. Narcissus responds with insults towards Carlan, provoking the soldiers who then threaten him. He cleverly dispatches them through a trapdoor into a water pool below. During breakfast, they discuss their next steps while keeping the soldiers trapped. Noticing Daryun's silent grief over his uncle's death, Narcissus attempts to lift his spirits. Arslan then makes a compelling offer. He promises to make Narcissus the court painter when he becomes king. Amused by Arslan's negotiation skills, Narcissus laughs heartily before pledging his complete loyalty to the young prince. After accepting Arslan's proposition, Narcissus and Elam pledge their allegiance. Narcissus attempts to send Elam to safety with a coastal friend, but Elam firmly refuses to leave his master's side. With Daryun and Arslan's support of Elam's decision, they prepare for departure to the royal capital. The soldiers trapped by Narcissus finally escape only to find their horses gone. The group takes refuge in a cave, where Elam's scouting reveals Carlin's soldiers searching throughout the forest. Narcissus devises a strategy to mislead their pursuers, demonstrating his tactical brilliance. When questioning Arslan about following his father's path, the young prince assures Narcissus that he'll never adopt Andragoras' arrogance, strengthening Narcissus' faith in the future king. At Peshawar Fortress, Captain Kishward receives devastating news about the Battle of Atropatene. The king is missing, and Lusitanian forces approach Ecbatana, the royal capital. He orders the gates sealed against the advancing enemy. The Lusitanians arrive, displaying a captured and brutalized Captain Shapur tied to a stake, demanding entry or they'll torture him further. When the Partians refuse to yield, the Lusitanians begin tormenting Shapur mercilessly. Unable to bear the shame and pain, Shapur begs his fellow Partians to end his life. While soldiers fire arrows randomly, a mysterious cloaked archer delivers a precise shot to Shapur's head. With a grateful smile, Shapur embraces death, maintaining his dignity until the end. As the mysterious archer returns to Pars, Queen Tahamane watches anxiously as the Lusitanians begin scaling the walls after Shapur's death. The archer later presents himself to the queen as Give, a traveling musician. The queen expresses gratitude for his merciful act towards Shapur and pardons him for the deed. During their conversation, a maiden interrupts, accusing Give of deception, claiming he had posed as a prince the previous night. Despite the embarrassing confrontation, the queen challenges Give to demonstrate his musical abilities. His performance with the banjo captivates the entire court, as he dedicates his song to the Partian soldiers defending their kingdom. The queen rewards his performance with a modest sum of gold. Meanwhile, Narcissus and Daryun analyze Lusitania's potential strategies for breaching Pars. Despite the gate's strength, Narcissus warns Arslan of a likely internal threat. He correctly predicts the Lusitanians' plan to exploit the slaves within Pars, a strategy that unfolds as Lusitanian forces scale the walls and promise freedom to the slaves in exchange for destroying the gates from within. Though Arslan is eager to save the royal capital, Narcissus counsels patience, explaining that 4 warriors cannot defeat an entire army. Meanwhile, the Lusitanians' promises of freedom resonate deeply with Pars's enslaved population. At the southern wall, Lord Garsh witnesses a horrifying sight, the displayed heads of Varis and others. When informed, Queen Tahamane briefly faints from shock. Cavalry Captain Sam joins Garsh to discuss recent events, with Garsh questioning the Queen's apparent lack of concern for Arslan. Their conversation is interrupted by news of slave rebellions, which Garsh attempts to suppress violently. Sam advises against such harsh measures, even as they respond to reports of slaves burning the temple. After executing 10 rebels, Sam warns that excessive violence will only fuel further unrest. As slave uprisings spread to the North Gate, Sam counsels the Queen to consider freeing the slaves with suitable compensation to quell the rebellion. The Queen promises to consider his suggestion. Meanwhile, Give observes these events from a high balcony, reflecting on his secret mission from the Grand Vizier to escort the queen safely from the palace. As the conflict intensifies into the night, Give guides important figures through Ecbatana's sewers to safety. Simultaneously, Narcissus devises a strategy to isolate and eliminate Carlin, reasoning that the traitor's fear of Arslan's survival and his uncertain standing with the Lusitanians will force him to act independently soon. In Ecbatana's sewers, Give reveals to his companion that she isn't the real queen. The woman, shocked by this revelation, threatens him with a knife and manages to kick him in a sensitive area before fleeing. Her escape leads her directly to a silver-masked man who introduces himself as the bringer of justice to Pars, with Carlin at his side. The masked figure suddenly kills the woman and proceeds forward. Give confronts the duo, engaging in combat with the masked man. Using fire as a distraction, Give temporarily blinds his opponent, who then orders his men to handle Give while he continues toward the palace. After dispatching the soldiers effortlessly, Give pauses to collect some treasure before hiding from approaching reinforcements. Meanwhile, Sam notices flames at the royal palace and rushes to investigate, finding Lusitanian forces freeing imprisoned slaves to join their ranks. He confronts Carlin about his betrayal, but is struck down by the masked man before receiving an answer. The Lusitanian forces successfully breach the capital's gates, leading to Garsh's death in the ensuing chaos as they overtake the royal palace. In this tumultuous moment, a priestess dispatched by the queen begins her search for Arslan, while Narcissus leads his group in executing their plan to trap Carlin. In the capital of Ecbatana, chaos unfolded as Lusitanian soldiers mercilessly interrogated and beat slaves and commoners in a desperate attempt to uncover the whereabouts of Queen Tahamane. Amid the turmoil, their gluttonous king strutted into the city, boldly claiming the throne of Ecbatana for himself. As the city descended further into disorder, a mysterious figure, the man in the silver mask, wandered the streets. Disgusted by the brutality of the Lusitanians, he remained silent, quietly biding his time for the perfect moment to enact his plans. Rumors swirled through the kingdom that Queen Tahamane had been captured by the silver-masked man and was to be presented to the king of Lusitania. However, an ominous legend surrounded Tahamane. Any man who fell in love with her and sought to marry her met a tragic fate. Even her most recent husband, King Andragoras, had killed his own brother to claim her as his own. Before him, her previous suitors had also fought and slain each other for the chance to wed her. Despite this grim history, the king of Lusitania shocked his subordinates by announcing his intention to marry Tahamane. The very idea left them reeling, as they had expected him to reject such a perilous union. Yet, driven by ambition, or perhaps something darker, the king declared his desire to take the queen as his bride, setting the stage for further intrigue and danger. Almost immediately after learning of his brother's reckless plan to marry Queen Tahamane, Prince Guiscard, the more rational sibling of the gluttonous Lusitanian king, is horrified. Dropping everything, he rushes to the palace to confront his brother. He finds the king in the treasure room and tries to talk sense into him, reminding him of the ominous fate that has befallen every man who has married Tahamine. Yet the king, already ensnared by her allure, dismisses Guiscard's concerns, confidently declaring that nothing bad will happen to him. Frustrated and unable to reason with his brother, Guiscard storms back to his quarters, consumed with anger over what he sees as a colossal mistake. As he vents his frustrations, the man in the silver mask appears, urging him to stay calm and wait for events to unfold. The silver-masked man reassures Guiscard that, when the time is right, they will take action. After briefly discussing other matters, their meeting ends, leaving Guiscard simmering but slightly more composed. Meanwhile, chaos reigns in the streets of Pars in the aftermath of the war. Lusitanian soldiers, emboldened by their victory, run amok, taking whatever they desire without paying. Among the commotion, a familiar teenage boy from the Lusitanian army comes across a stall selling giraffes. The sight sparks a memory, and he eagerly asks the stall owner if they know anything about a white-haired boy. It's then revealed that this teenager is the same boy Arslan freed 3 years earlier. Now, he has returned to the city, determined to find his long-lost friend. Carlan, the traitor, contemplates his future when the man in the silver mask interrupts his thoughts, telling him to stop worrying and focus on preparing his men for battle. Carlan nods in agreement and leaves the room, overhearing Lusitanian soldiers mocking him as he walks past with his head lowered. Meanwhile, a boy sits by a fountain, lost in memories of the past. Carlin's soldiers begin parading through the streets as commoners gather to watch these traitors march proudly. Among the onlookers stands a woman in a white cloak. A Lusitanian soldier approaches her, leading her to an alley with ill intent. Once there, the woman removes her disguise and kills him. The boy, sensing the commotion, follows them only to find the dead soldier. Growing suspicious, he demands the woman reveal herself. When she tries to flee, he forcefully removes her cloak, discovering that she is actually a boy. Before he can make sense of this, slaves surround him, demanding rewards for helping the Lusitanian soldiers. Elam, the disguised individual, escapes and returns to report his findings. Narcissus anticipates Carlan's next moves, reasoning that a cunning strategist like him would burn every village in the area to eliminate Arslan's potential hiding places. Upon hearing about Carlan's possible actions, Arslan prepares to leave their hideout to confront him. Daryun and Narcissus finish their planning before joining Arslan's mission. In the mountains of Pars, Give encounters Lusitanian soldiers but ignores them until he spots a woman riding past. Concerned for her safety, he follows her, only to find her being harassed by the soldiers. To his surprise, she defeats more than half of her attackers herself, leaving him to handle the remainder. After the fight, Give approaches to introduce himself, but she dismisses him. When he calls out, she stops briefly to listen. Despite his self-praise, she remains unimpressed and introduces herself as Ferengis, a priestess serving Mithra. Even after learning this, Give continues his attempts to impress her. Ferengis mentions she's seeking lodging for the night, and when Give questions why she travels alone, she reveals she's searching for Arslan. That night, Carlin and his soldiers massacre a small village during their search for Arslan. The villagers, confused about why Parshan soldiers would attack their own people, fail to realize they've been betrayed by their killer. Give, enchanted by Ferengis's beauty, follows her like a devoted guard dog, hanging on her every word. Eventually, Ferengis grows weary of his presence and questions his persistent following. Give declares that her beauty has captivated him, vowing to follow her to the world's end. Ferengis ignores his flattery and continues riding. As Give struggles to keep pace, Ferengis pauses to survey the landscape. She produces a whistle and blows into it, though Give remains unimpressed as he hears nothing. Still, he continues his declarations of undying loyalty. Ferengis finally tells him he may accompany her if he pledges loyalty to Arslan. After some hesitation, Give agrees. As they ride forward, they discover Carlin's soldiers searching the forest desperately for Arslan's group. A young porter, planted by Narcissus to deceive Carlan, arrives at his camp bearing injuries. He attempts to mislead Carlan about Narcissus and Arslan's location, claiming they headed south. However, Carlan sees through this deception and kills the porter. Yet he falls for Narcissus' second trap, failing to realize that Narcissus anticipated his reaction. When his guards report evidence of Arslan's party traveling north, Carlan hastily pursues these false tracks. This leads him and his soldiers into a ravine with a single entry and exit point. Narcissus observes from above as Carlan walks into his trap, when suddenly Ferengis and Give attack him. Upon learning Narcissus serves Prince Arslan, Ferengis ceases her attack, and they join forces against Carlan. Nearby, Elam provides Arslan with a bow and arrows for the upcoming battle. When Carlan's forces are deep in the ravine, Arslan reveals himself from above. Blinded by his desire to kill Arslan, Carlan orders his men to attack. Arslan and Elam eliminate over half the climbing soldiers with their arrows, while Narcissus deploys smoke bombs to silently take out the ground forces. In the confusion, Karlan's soldiers lose heart, believing they face an enormous army. Elam adds to their fear by shouting that Daryun and his army have arrived. Panic-stricken, the soldiers flee, abandoning Karlan. Refusing to retreat with victory so close, Karlan rides up the ravine toward Arslan. Before their confrontation, Arslan demands to know why he betrayed their country. Karlan charges forward without answering. Just as he's about to reach Arslan, Daryun appears to protect the prince. A fierce duel ensues, with Daryun cunningly feigning vulnerability to bait Karlan into attacking recklessly. When Karlan launches his attack, Daryun strikes him off his horse with the back of his lance. Karlan falls down the slope, meeting his end as his own spear pierces his throat. Daryun and Arslan hurry to Karlan's side before his final moments. The dying traitor takes one last look at them and smiles. When Daryun questions him about the king's location, Karlan reveals that while the king lives, he doesn't know his exact whereabouts. After Karlan's death, Pharangis formally presents herself to Arslan, with Give following suit, declaring his intention to serve Arslan, the future king of Pars. Once introductions conclude, Arslan requests Pharangis to perform an elegy for Karlan's fallen soldiers, noting that despite their betrayal, they were still Partian citizens. This request both surprises and disgusts Give, though he dismisses these feelings, content to remain near Pharangis. Daryun and Narcissus discuss the addition of Pharangis and Give to their group, with Narcissus pointing out that 6 members are better than 4. Daryun agrees with this logic. Deep in the Lusitanian dungeons, the man in the silver mask reveals himself to Andragoras as Hilmes, son of his deceased brother Osroes. He confronts Andragoras about killing his father 16 years ago to be with Tahamene. Hilmes demands Andragoras take a good look at him, the true heir to the Partian throne, and witness what's to come. After meeting with Andragoras, Hilmes is called away by another masked figure who informs him of Karlan's death and those responsible. Hilmes frowns, wondering about Arslan's whereabouts. With his key player Karlan now dead, he must revise his strategy. Before departing, the masked man warns Hilmes that the Partian sun shines for both him and Arslan. If he's not careful, Arslan might claim the throne right from under him. Several days after Karlan's death, Narcissus and Daryun disguise themselves and infiltrate Pars to locate Andragoras's prison. Meanwhile, King Innocentus of Lusitania finds his intended bride, Tahamene, in the palace courtyard. He approaches her, attempting to make her laugh, while she sits in disgusted silence, enduring his foolish chatter. Elsewhere, Archbishop Baudin grows increasingly frustrated with the king's recent impulsive decisions. He channels his anger toward Pars by burning the sacred historical texts in the royal library. As night falls, Baudin sets ablaze every sacred document they discover. Some soldiers try to reason with him, but Baudin, enraged, throws anyone who opposes him into the flames. King Innocentus watches fearfully nearby, intimidated by Baudin's madness. Among the gathered crowd, Daryun and Narcissus witness their library's desecration and vow revenge against Baudin. The next day, Give finds Pharangis alone, on horseback in the forest. He approaches, playfully commenting on her beauty, but Pharangis, weary of his jests, moves away. Despite Give's persistent attempts to gain her attention, their exchange is interrupted by passing Lusitanian soldiers. Meanwhile, Arslan and Elam discuss the potential dangers they might face while preparing to enter the kingdom. When Elam rises to fetch water from a nearby village well, Arslan convinces him to allow his company, and Elam agrees. At the village well, Arslan attempts to draw water but accidentally drops the pail in after cutting the rope. Embarrassed, he hides in a nearby shed while Elam searches for a replacement. During this time, Arslan witnesses soldiers harassing a man to surrender his daughter. He grabs an axe to confront them, but before the situation escalates, Captain Etoile appears and orders his men to release the woman and her father. Studying Arslan closely, Etoile recognizes him as the boy who helped him 3 years ago, though he remains unaware of Arslan's true identity, assuming him to be merely a privileged youth. Arslan maintains this pretense as Etoile boasts about his position as captain and criticizes Andragoras and his son Arslan, insisting they will eventually accept Yaldabaoth's faith. Arslan listens silently to these proclamations. When Arslan questions why Lusitania would invade Pars, if they truly believed in equality, Etoile becomes aggressive. Elam returns and draws his sword to protect Arslan, but Arslan calms the situation. He then solemnly informs Etoile about the fate of his former friends. Upon hearing of their deaths, Etoile hands Arslan the holy book of Yaldabaoth before departing. As night falls, Narcissus and Daryun patrol Ecbatana's streets in disguise. At a pub, they encounter a drunk who insults them, but flees in terror upon seeing Daryun's face. Narcissus separates from Daryun, deliberately leading their followers into an alley where he defeats all but one. They interrogate the survivor about Andragorus's location, but he claims ignorance while revealing Innocentus's proposal to Tahameni. They spare him and continue their search. Minutes later, they spot the masked man observing them from a balcony. Daryun attacks immediately, breaking Hilmes' silver mask to reveal his severely burned face. Enraged, Hilmes intensifies his attack as Narcissus joins the fight, introducing himself to an unimpressed Hilmes. Their battle continues until guards arrive, forcing Narcissus and Daryun to steal horses from the stables and flee the capital to devise a new strategy. Upon returning to the cave, Narcissus and Daryun report their findings to Arslan. When the prince suggests gathering more allies to combat the Lusitanians, Narcissus advises him to focus on his role as future king and leave strategic planning to him. Hours later, 400 soldiers discover their hideout, forcing them to flee on horseback. During the intense pursuit, they manage to eliminate several enemies while Daryun searches for a safe escape route. He discovers one and rejoins the group, leading them to Kashan's fortress, one of the few remaining strongholds loyal to old Pars. Upon their arrival, fortress archers unleash a barrage of arrows on the pursuing Lusitanians from the walls, decimating their forces. Lord Hodir, the fortress master, welcomes them with a feast. During the meal, he speaks extensively to Arslan, attempting to arrange a marriage between the prince and his 13-year-old daughter. Arslan deflects this by sharing his plans to abolish slavery and establish equality, expecting resistance given the numerous slaves he observed outside. Surprisingly, Hodir expresses agreement with these reforms. After the feast, servants escort everyone to separate rooms, with Arslan placed alone despite Daryun's objections. The others eventually convince Daryun to accept this arrangement. Later, Hodir visits Arslan privately, prompting Daryun and Narcissus to discuss his motives. Narcissus deduces that Hodir aims to secure his family's royal connection through marriage. Following Hodir's departure, Arslan cleverly scales the walls from his balcony to reach his companion's window. Elam and the others nearly attack him before recognizing their prince. Arslan reveals that Hodir advised against freeing the slaves, claiming it would destroy Partian traditions, and pressed the marriage proposal again. Narcissus laughs at this predictable development and begins outlining their next move. Ferengis, sensing someone lurking by her window, moves stealthily to investigate. She opens the door and nearly hurls Give several stories down, but he quickly explains that he's there with a message from the Lord Tactician. Attempting to charm her, Give diffuses the tension, though Ferengis remains skeptical of his intentions. Elsewhere, Daryun lies awake, troubled by memories of his last encounter with Carlin. Rising from his bed, he rouses Narcissus, who is resting nearby. Daryun voices his concerns, questioning whether Arslan is truly King Andragorus's biological son. Narcissus reassures him, dismissing the notion as improbable and advising him not to dwell on it. Just then, Alam appears from the ceiling, revealing a sleep-inducing substance hidden above their room by Hodir. Narcissus, frowning at Hodir's underhanded tactics, quickly devises a plan. Hearing a disturbance outside, the group hides, prepared to turn Hodir's scheme against him. Hodir, confident his trap has worked, approaches Arslan's door with his soldiers, believing Narcissus and Daryun incapacitated. He demands Arslan order the soldiers to eliminate them, assuming the young prince to be a naive and easily manipulated boy. Calm and composed, Arslan questions Hodir's motives. Hodir admits he wants Daryun and Narcissus removed because of their influence on Arslan, particularly their push to abolish slavery. Arslan counters with a measured response, emphasizing the crucial roles Narcissus and Daryun play in his campaign. He then steps out, rallying his people to leave Hodir's castle. As they move outside, Hodir attempts to ambush them, commanding his soldiers to attack. However, Ferengis anticipates his move and swiftly neutralizes the approaching soldiers. Enraged, Hodir orders his forces to advance. Daryun dismounts his horse, warning the soldiers to think twice before engaging him. Intimidated, they hesitate, but Hodir presses on, commanding his archers to fire. Elam's earlier plan proves effective as the archers find their bowstrings cut and their attack thwarted. Infuriated, Hodir orders his men to capture Arslan. A fight ensues, with Hodir's forces overwhelmed by Arslan's companions. As the situation escalates, Daryun gives Hodir one final chance to surrender. Ignoring the warning, Hodir lunges at Arslan, intent on killing him. In response, Daryun strikes decisively, ending Hodir's life with a thrust of his sword. Following Hodir's death, Arslan goes to the dungeons to free the enslaved people. To his surprise, the slaves react with hostility, charging at him in anger over the loss of their generous master. Once safe, Arslan questions Narcissus about their reaction. Narcissus explains that the slaves preferred servitude under a benevolent master to the uncertainty of freedom and survival on their own. This revelation prompts Arslan to reconsider his views on slavery, reflecting deeply on how to lead his people effectively. Narcissus, however, encourages him to stay true to his path of righteousness, assuring him that his efforts will bear fruit in time. With renewed resolve, Arslan announces their next destination, Peshawar. At the fortress, Bahman, a cavalry captain, discovers an important scroll left behind by Vahriz before his death. As he examines the document, he wonders about its significance and what actions it may demand of him. Back in the royal palace of Ekbatana, Giscard and his subordinates arrive to meet King Innocentus. There they find Archbishop Bodin fervently attempting to convince the king to approve a shocking request, to offer the lives of the Parsians as sacrifices to their deity. Giscard and the other rational members of the court are appalled by the audacity of this demand and don't hesitate to voice their opposition. A heated argument ensues, with Giscard warning Bodin that such an action could incite a massive rebellion among the Parsians. Bodin, however, appears unfazed. Confident in the strength of his 300,000-strong army, he dismisses the possibility of any Parsian uprising succeeding. As the debate continues, Bodin reveals an even more startling development. His holy warriors, loyal to their deity Yaldabaoth, are on their way to Ekbatana. Moments later, the warriors, bearing the holy flag of Lusitania's creator, arrive at the capital, their presence casting an ominous shadow over the already tense atmosphere. Elsewhere, Sam, long presumed dead, regains consciousness on his sickbed. Confused and disoriented, he struggles to understand why he is still alive. His bewilderment deepens when Hilmaz, the man in the silver mask, appears before him. Introducing himself, Hilmaz delivers a cryptic message that leaves Sam wide-eyed with shock. Without further explanation, Hilmaz dons his mask and departs, leaving Sam to ponder his words. Meanwhile, Arslan and his companions continue their journey to Peshawar. Deep in thought, Arslan reflects on his conversation with Narcissus from the previous night. So engrossed is he in his musings that he forgets to stop and rest their horses. Elam eventually halts and gently reminds Arslan to take a break, snapping him out of his reverie. The two engage in a brief conversation about Elam's future before resuming their journey. Observing Arslan's behavior, Give is surprised by the prince's unassuming demeanor and questions Narcissus about it. Narcissus explains that Arslan's actions stem from his kind heart and his refusal to take those around him for granted. Hearing this, Give smiles, gaining a newfound respect for Arslan and the compassionate king he is destined to become. Elsewhere, Hilm stares into a mirror, his gaze fixed on the deep scars that mar his face. The sight stirs painful memories, pulling him back to the darkest night of his life. The night Andragoras set his father's room ablaze, trapping them both inside. Hilm has barely escaped with his life, enduring severe burns to his face in the process. Snapping back to the present, a maid enters his room to clean, and Hilmaz briefly harasses her before sharply questioning her purpose. The maid informs him of a visitor, prompting Hilmaz to put his mask back on and meet them. The visitor turns out to be Zande, the son of Carlin, who has come to seek Hilmaz's permission and resources to hunt down Daryun and avenge his father's death. Hilmaz, unimpressed by Zande's confidence, mocks him briefly, but ultimately provides him with the manpower he requests to carry out his mission. By nightfall, Ferengis performs a ritual by the river, chanting softly as she senses something unusual. Her findings reveal a group of bloodthirsty individuals on their trail. Wasting no time, she warns the group, allowing them to prepare for the impending danger. Moments later, Lusitanian soldiers arrive, led by none other than Xanda as their captain. Acting quickly, Narcissus leads the group deeper into the forest, attempting to evade their pursuers. Along the way, Narcissus and Daryan discreetly split from the others, doubling back to confront the attackers. Farangi soon joins them, unleashing her deadly precision to take down as many enemies as possible. The skirmish continues until Xanda himself steps forward. Frustrated by his soldiers' failure against Daryun's small force, he berates them as weaklings before drawing his long sword. Declaring a duel to the death, Xanda charges at Daryun without waiting for a response, demonstrating surprising strength and skill. Despite being impressed, Daryun holds his ground. The duel intensifies until Ferengis intervenes, shooting Zande's horse and incapacitating him momentarily. With Zande vulnerable, Daryun has a clear opportunity to strike him down but chooses mercy instead. Leaving Zande behind, he regroups with Ferengis and Narcissus, and together they hurry to rejoin Arslan and Elam, continuing their journey forward. Elam, Give, and Arslan encounter their own challenges when they come face to face with a group of Lusitanian soldiers blocking their path. Reacting quickly, they manage to dispatch the few soldiers pursuing them and attempt to flee on horseback. However, the enemy is relentless, shooting arrows as they give chase. One of the arrows strikes Elam's horse, causing him to fall. Rather than abandoning him, Arslan turns back without hesitation. Fighting off a nearby guard, he helps Elam to his feet and gets him back on his horse. Meanwhile, Give cleverly tosses a handful of gold coins to the ground, causing a distraction as the soldiers scramble for the loot. This gives the group just enough time to escape. They ride toward a cliff and, thinking quickly, hide just beneath it. When their pursuers arrive, they assume the trio has jumped into the river below. The plan works, and the enemies abandon their search. Hours later, when the group is finally safe, Elam questions Arslan about why he risked his life to save him. He points out that most royals would have left him behind without a second thought. Arslan simply responds that he considers Elam his friend, and that's all the reason he needed. Touched by this, Elam grows flustered but sincerely thanks Arslan for saving his life. Jeev, impressed by Arslan's humility, takes the opportunity to ask about his childhood. Arslan reveals that, unlike most royals, he wasn't raised in the palace. Instead, he lived among the commoners until he was old enough to join court life. Hearing this, Jeev begins to understand why Arslan is so approachable and down to earth. With a smile, he reflects on the kind of compassionate king Arslan is destined to become. Narcissus rides alone, scouting the path ahead for any potential dangers. After traveling a short distance, he spots a group of horsemen adorned with strange facial tattoos. Recognizing them as members of the infamous Zot clan, a group known for raising bandits and thieves, Narcissus hides to observe them. To his surprise, he witnesses the Zot clan's leader, Haltash, confront Hilmaz and his squad. Haltash boldly demands that Hilmaz and his men leave behind their gold and weapons. Hilmaz, insulted by such arrogance, reacts without hesitation, cutting Haltash down in one swift motion. This ignites chaos as the Zot clan members retaliate, but Hilmaz swiftly dispatches them all, leaving behind only a young girl, Alfarid, the daughter of Haltash. Defiant and enraged, Alfarid attempts to attack Hilmaz with her weapon. Despite her efforts, Hilmaz easily disarms her and orders her to stay down. Refusing to give in, Alfarid spits in his face, further provoking him. Just as Hilmaz prepares to strike her down, Narcissus appears, interrupting the standoff. Taking advantage of the distraction, Alfarid escapes Hilmaz's grasp and boldly asks Narcissus for his weapon so she can avenge her father. Narcissus refuses, but instead, he steps forward to challenge Hilmaz to a duel. The two exchange blows, testing each other's skills, until they pause to reassess the situation. Narcissus subtly glances upward, checking if his trap is ready to spring. Seeing the signs align, he continues to stall, knowing he needs just a little more time. Hilmaz, oblivious to the trap, attempts to recruit Narcissus to his side. Smiling, Narcissus firmly rejects the offer and abruptly retreats as the trap activates. Rocks tumble down from above, crashing onto Hilmaz and his soldiers. When the dust settles, Hilmaz remains standing, unharmed but visibly frustrated as he searches the plains for Narcissus. At that moment, a sorcerer manipulating earth magic emerges from the ground, mocking Hilmaz for losing his opponent. Meanwhile, Narcissus escapes with Alfarid. When they reach a safe distance, Narcissus dismounts to rest his horse. Alfarid, overwhelmed with grief, begins crying for her father and the fallen members of her clan. After regaining her composure, she learns Narcissus's name and continues riding alongside him. During their journey back to rejoin the others, Narcissus casually reveals that the rock slide was his doing. Skeptical, Alfarid dismisses his claim, prompting Narcissus to launch into an impromptu explanation of the physics behind the trap. Annoyed, Alfarid interrupts, asking him to stop boring her. Instead, she expresses her desire to accompany him in the future. Narcissus asks if she has any family left to return to in her clan. Alfarid, with a tinge of sadness, replies that there's no one important enough for her to go back to. Tensions between King Innocentus of Lusitania and his subordinates escalate with each passing day, as doubts about his leadership grow due to his controversial proposal to marry the infamous Tahamane. The unrest reaches a boiling point when Hildigo, commander of the Temple Knights, is assassinated by someone within Guiscard's army. Matters worsen when a worldly woman from Pars is implicated in the assassination of Archbishop Bodan. The following day, Bodan accuses Innocentus of orchestrating Hildigo's murder to weaken Bodan's military power. Innocentus, panicked and unable to handle the situation, calls on his younger brother Guiscard to defend him. Aware of the true events, Guiscard redirects the blame onto Bodan, pointing out that Hildigo's disgraceful death alongside a harlot renders him unworthy of his holy title. Guiscard firmly puts Bodan in his place, reminding him that he is merely an archbishop and warning him not to overstep his authority. Humiliated, Bodan takes his holy knights and departs Ekbatana. Meanwhile, Arslan and Elam continue their journey toward Peshawar. Along the way, they come across a legendary city and pause to discuss its history. Geev, scouting ahead, calls out to them, revealing that Peshawar is now within reach. Farther back, Daryun and Farangiz push on to catch up with Arslan and the others. However, Zande, relentless in his pursuit, finally catches up to them, accompanied by the earth-traveling sorcerer. Upon reaching them, Zande challenges Daryun to another duel to the death, with the sorcerer assisting him this time. Daryun and Farangiz quickly recognize the sorcerer's danger and try to avoid his attacks while battling Zande. Zande launches a ferocious assault on Daryun, and the sorcerer gets dangerously close to dealing a critical blow. Just in time, Arslan arrives to strike at the sorcerer, creating a distraction. Sensing the opportunity, the sorcerer shifts his focus to Arslan, charging toward him with lethal intent. Pinned down by Zande, Daryan sees the imminent danger and summons all his strength to break free. With lightning speed, he rushes toward the sorcerer, waiting for him to materialize fully before delivering a decisive stab. With the sorcerer defeated, Daryan turns back to Zande, disarming him with ease. Realizing he is outnumbered, Zande attempts to flee, but Ferengis, showing pity, shoots an arrow that knocks him down. The battle over, Daryan apologizes to Arslan for leaving him vulnerable during the fight. Arslan reassures him, expressing gratitude for Elam's timely intervention and showing remarkable maturity in his response. Moved by Arslan's words and growth, Daryan swears a renewed vow of loyalty. This time, his pledge is not to the throne, but to the man Arslan is becoming, promising to protect him with his life for as long as he lives. After Daryan's renewed vow of loyalty to Arslan, the group continued their journey to the fortress of Peshawar. Along the way, they encountered a group of Lusitanian soldiers who launched an attack. Just when the situation seemed dire, Kishward, Azrael the Bird, and a contingent of Peshawar soldiers arrived to assist. They swiftly took down several Lusitanians and forced the rest to retreat. Once the skirmish was over, Narcissus appeared with Alfarid, reuniting with Arslan and the others. The group gathered to greet Kishward and his soldiers, with Arslan expressing his relief and joy at seeing one of his father's trusted allies alive and well. Hoping for more reunions with loyal Parsians, Arslan thanked Kishward for his timely assistance. During the introductions, Alfarid introduced herself as Narcissus' wife, shocking Arslan and his companions. The group was too stunned to question her, and the matter lingered in awkward silence as they entered the gates of Peshawar Fortress. Inside the fortress, the Parsian soldiers cheered for Arslan, welcoming their prince with open arms. As they made their way through the fortress, the group confronted Narcissus about his supposed marriage to Alfarid. Tired of their questioning, Narcissus urged Alfarid to clarify the situation. Smirking, Alfarid confessed that while they weren't officially married, she claimed they loved each other. Narcissus frowned and corrected her, pointing out that he had simply rescued her from the man in the silver mask. The group remained unconvinced but chose to let the matter rest. Soon after, Bahman, the lord of Peshawar Fortress, arrived to greet Arslan. The prince wasted no time and requested Bahman's support in reclaiming the kingdom of Pars from Lusitanian control. Both Bahman and Kishward pledged their unwavering loyalty to Arslan and his cause. By nightfall, Hilmas, the silver-masked man, reached Peshawar. From a distance, he began plotting his strategy to infiltrate the fortress. Meanwhile, within the fortress walls, Arslan stumbled upon Give complaining about Daryan being overly close to Ferengis. Arslan tried to mediate, apologizing on Daryan's behalf, but Give brushed it off, quickly shifting the conversation to his musings about beauty and the pursuit of women. Arslan, unsure how to respond, pretended to understand and excused himself. Elsewhere, Alfarid found Elam diligently preparing Narcissus' belongings. Teasing him, she declared that she would be taking over the care of Lord Narcissus from that moment forward. Offended, Elam retorted, leading to a heated argument between the two. As the exchange escalated, Alfarid, annoyed, stormed out, leaving Elam fuming. Alfarid visits Ferengis to express her frustration about Narcissus' indifference toward her. Ferengis counsels patience, explaining that Narcissus is too focused on his mission to pursue romantic interests. Meanwhile, Arslan discusses Azrael the Bird and Soroush with Kishward, who reveals that Soroush and his team haven't returned from their mission and may be dead. Arslan vows to build an army in Peshawar and liberate the slaves once he becomes king. Kishward warns him about potential opposition from the Senate lords regarding slave emancipation. Arslan responds with a smile, stating his intention to rescue his defiant father and discuss these plans with him. The next day, during a meeting with Peshawar's lords about raising an army, Bahman unexpectedly forbids Arslan's proposal. Daryan and Narcissus provoke Bahman until he angrily leaves the room, with Narcissus noting that Bahman's anger was merely a pretext for his exit. Kishward reveals that Bahman's behavior stems from a message received from Vahriz before his death, leaving everyone wondering about its contents. Later, while Arslan reflects on recent events, from a balcony, Hilmes ambushes him. Despite Arslan's attempts at dialogue, Hilmes eagerly attacks. Their duel reveals Arslan's inexperience against Hilmes' superior swordsmanship. When disarmed and cornered, Arslan uses a torch to defend himself, triggering Hilmes' apparent fear of fire. Ferengis and others arrive to protect Arslan, and during the confrontation, Hilmes reveals himself as Pars's rightful king. As he moves to strike Arslan, Bahman interposes himself, taking the fatal blow. Though regretful about killing someone he respected, Hilmes retreats. When others move to pursue, Bahman stops them, wanting to preserve the royal bloodline. This reveals the shocking possibility that Arslan isn't Andragoras' son, suggesting Tahamane's infidelity. With his dying breath, Bahman implores Arslan to become a worthy king, despite being born of wedlock. Before they can process Bahman's death and these revelations, a soldier bursts in with urgent news. A Sindaran army of 30,000, led by their second prince, is advancing on their position. Upon hearing urgent news of an impending attack, Daryun and Arslan immediately convened an emergency meeting with the fortress generals. During the meeting, Arslan momentarily drifted into deep thought, reflecting on his final moments with Bahman and the weight of their conversation. Snapping back to reality, he addressed the gathered leaders, instructing them to prepare for battle and defend Peshawar against the advancing Sindarans. Meanwhile, Rajendra, the second prince of Sindora and a cunning pretender to the throne, led his troops through the snowy forest, intent on laying siege to Peshawar fortress. One of his generals rode alongside him, cautioning against attacking the fortress on such a cold winter night. Rajendra dismissed the advice, arguing that this was the perfect time to strike, with Pars weakened and vulnerable. Additionally, he was eager to score an easy victory over his elder brother, Godhevi, the first prince of Sindora, and prove his worthiness to claim the throne. The general, resigned to Rajendra's determination, fell silent and continued riding. Back at the fortress, Arslan and his companions finalized preparations for the defense. Once the soldiers were ready, Narcissus and Daryan approached Arslan to seek permission to lead the forces into battle. Concerned, Arslan expressed his desire to join them on the front lines. However, Narcissus and Daryun urged him to stay behind, emphasizing the importance of preserving his safety and allowing his commanders to handle the fight. Reluctantly, Arslan agreed and stayed back at the fortress. As they descended the stairs to join the troops, Narcissus and Daryan discussed Arslan's recent behavior. Both were worried that his growing responsibilities and burdens might cause him to lose sight of his righteous ideals. Narcissus, however, reassured Daryan, reminding him of Arslan's inherent goodness and resilience. Meanwhile, just outside Peshawar, Hilmes and his earth sorcerer, who had been spying on the fortress and Arslan's movements, decided to retreat to the royal capital, leaving the stage set for the upcoming battle. Narcissus and Daryan lead 10,000 soldiers from the fortress to confront the Sindaran army. When Daryan expresses concern about the enemy's superior numbers, Narcissus explains his strategy based on the three principles of war: heaven's time, optimal timing; terrain's advantage, geographical benefits; and people's harmony, enemy morale. Planning to exploit the Sindaran's ignorance of these principles, Narcissus outlines a three-part strategy: attack at night when they're fatigued, use Pars's unfamiliar terrain and weather to their advantage, and manipulate Prince Godhevi into attacking his brother Rajendra's forces. Daryun, impressed by the plan's sophistication, eagerly awaits its execution. That night, the strategy unfolds as planned. Though the Sindarans initially dominate, they soon falter from snow-induced exhaustion. When Godhevi's forces attack Rajendra from behind, Narcissus seizes the opportunity to trap the Sindaran army on a frozen lake. In the ensuing chaos, Narcissus, Daryan, and Alfarid successfully capture Rajendra. The next morning, Rajendra faces his captors, expecting execution. Instead, Arslan surprises him by cutting his bonds and hosting a banquet in his honor. During the feast, Rajendra engages in a drinking contest with Gieva and Farangis, while outside, Elam and Alfarid continue their familiar quarrel over caring for Narcissus. After Giv and Rajendra succumb to drink, Arslan presents Rajendra with a proposition: an alliance in exchange for help defeating Godhevi and claiming Sindora's throne. Should Rajendra refuse, they threaten to spread rumors of treason against him. Amused by their cunning, Rajendra accepts the alliance. The following day, Rajendra meets with Arslan to seal their partnership, though Narcissus and Daryun remain wary of his true intentions. Meanwhile, Godhevi learns of this alliance and grows concerned about his brother's increasing threat. However, Grand Vizier Mahendra counsels patience, revealing they have planted a spy within Rajendra's forces to undermine them from within. After forming an alliance with Rajendra, Arslan and Rajendra's combined forces marched to confront Godhevi and his army. The battle began in the early hours of a winter morning and raged on until Godhevi's forces were finally driven into retreat. With victory secured, Rajendra approached Arslan, showering him with congratulations and excessive flattery, praising his pivotal role in the triumph. However, Narcissus and Daryan grew increasingly wary of Rajendra's intentions, suspecting the cunning prince of harboring ulterior motives. They watched silently as he continued to chatter, calculating what schemes might be hidden beneath his words. Meanwhile, not far away, Jaswant, a spy planted by Mahendra, observed the state of Rajendra and Arslan's army from a distance. As the new year approached, Pars prepared for celebrations. Arslan participated in a symbolic coronation ceremony organized by the soldiers, formally recognizing him as their lord and king. Following the ceremony, the troops gathered for a grand banquet, indulging in food and revelry. Give predictably gravitated toward Ferengis, while Al-Farid busied herself by pestering Narcissus and Elam. Amid the festivities, Arslan took a moment to step outside for fresh air. It was there that Rajendra approached him, requesting a private discussion. Later that night, Arslan and his trusted companions convened a meeting to analyze Rajendra's strategies. After careful deliberation, Narcissus deduced that Rajendra intended to use Arslan and his forces as a decoy, aiming to eliminate both Gativi and Pars in one swift stroke. To counter this treachery, Narcissus proposed a strategy. Let Rajendra believe they were falling into his trap, only to turn the tables on him at the right moment. He outlined a series of demands they could make to gain Rajendra's cooperation, while subtly undermining his plans. Though Arslan didn't fully grasp the complexities of the scheme, he trusted Narcissus' judgment and agreed to proceed. 2 days later, Jaswant arrived at the camp and offered his services as a guide for Arslan's forces on the battlefield. Arslan accepted, welcoming him into their ranks. Jaswant soon wandered deeper into the camp, where he encountered Give. Ever the opportunist, Give greeted him with a soldier's welcome and engaged in some light conversation before challenging him to a sparring match. Observing Jaswant's skill firsthand, Give acknowledged his prowess and allowed him to continue on his way. Unbeknownst to Jaswant, Narcissus and Daryun had been watching the sparring session from a distance. Both noted Jaswant's impressive abilities and resolved to keep a close eye on him, knowing that his true allegiance might yet remain uncertain. When Arslan's army reaches the Sindaran fortress Gujarat, Narcissus suggests sending envoys to negotiate passage. Give and Jaswant meet with Lord Tara, offering gold and supplies in exchange for safe passage. Tara requests time to consider their proposal. After the envoys leave, Jaswant secretly returns, revealing himself as Mahendra's agent and warning Tara that the offer is merely a diversion while the Parshans slip through undetected. He advises Tara to attack their rear supply lines instead of launching an immediate assault. However, Narcissus had anticipated this betrayal. When Jaswant signals Tara's forces to attack the supply carriages, Parshan soldiers emerge and overwhelm them. Give captures Jaswant from his hiding spot in the trees, while Daryun defeats Tara's last-ditch attempt to reach Arslan, sending his forces into retreat. The next day, Arslan confronts Jaswant about his betrayal. Jaswant explains his unwavering loyalty to Mahendra, the only person who ever showed him kindness. To everyone's surprise, Arslan chooses to free Jaswant rather than punish him. That evening, Elam and Alfarid continue their rivalry over caring for Narcissus, seeking his preference for their cooking. Narcissus diplomatically accepts both their offers. Later, he discusses Arslan's parentage with Daryun, concluding that despite potentially lacking royal blood, Arslan remains the most suitable candidate for kingship. Meanwhile, Gadavi rages upon learning about Gujarat's fall, struggling to comprehend Arslan's role in the defeat. Mahendra calms him, mentioning their war elephants as their remaining advantage against the Parshans. The day ends with Daryun finding a troubled Arslan on his balcony, concerned about his questionable royal lineage. Daryun kneels before him, pledging his continued support and affirming Arslan's destiny as Pars's future king, regardless of his bloodline. At the fortress of Gujarat, news reached Arslan about Gadavi and his infamous war elephants advancing with an army of 150,000 soldiers. The sheer strength of the elephants posed a daunting challenge, prompting Arslan, Narcissus, and the others to deliberate on a strategy to counter them. After much consideration, Narcissus devised a clever plan to neutralize Gativi's forces. Rajendra, unaware of the intricacies of Narcissus' strategy but trusting in his brilliance, began preparing his troops for the imminent battle. Before departing the fortress, Narcissus and Arslan reviewed their plan once more, ensuring every detail was accounted for. Meanwhile, at Gadavi's camp, news of Jaswant's failure to protect the fortress reached the prince. Summoning Jaswant to his tent, Gadavi unsheathed his sword, intending to execute him. Mahendra intervened, pleading for Jaswant's life. Reluctantly, Gadavi spared Jaswant but sternly warned that another failure would cost him his head. Grateful but shaken, Jaswant thanked both Gadavi and Mahendra. After Jaswant departed, Mahendra criticized Gadavi's disregard for his comrades, expressing his disappointment in the prince's lack of loyalty. Back at Gujarat, preparations for battle were in full swing. Narcissus and Daryun oversaw the construction of specialized weapons and gear to combat Godheavy's war elephants. Daryon voiced concerns about their disadvantage, but Narcissus reassured him, urging faith in Arslan and the effectiveness of their strategy. A few days later, the armies of Godheavy and Rajendra faced off on the plains of Chandigarh, ready to settle their rivalry. Before the battle, the brothers exchanged heated insults, stoking the flames of their animosity. As the war began, a river divided the two armies, forcing each side to split their forces. Gotoubun seized the opportunity to send his war elephants against Rajendra's troops. Rajendra's soldiers, desperate to stop the elephants, fired arrows at them, but the elephants' thick hides rendered the attacks ineffective. As the war elephants rampaged through their ranks, trampling soldiers with terrifying ease, panic spread through Rajendra's army. Each moment brought more losses, and despair began to take hold. To make matters worse, reports came that Godheavy had dispatched a portion of his forces to trap the Parshans at the fortress, further complicating Rajendra's position. Just as hope seemed lost, Arslan and his Parshan forces arrived on the battlefield, cutting through enemy soldiers with precision and determination. Rajendra, astounded by their unexpected arrival, rushed to Arslan's side, demanding to know how they had bypassed Godheavy's blockade. Narcissus revealed their clever deception. They had used paper soldiers to create the illusion of a fully manned fortress, tricking Godheavy's troops into holding their position unnecessarily. Rajendra, impressed by the ingenuity, laughed at the dirty trick and welcomed the Parshans' aid. With Arslan's forces now fully engaged, the tide of battle began to shift. The Parshans fought valiantly, clearing a path toward victory as Rajendra's soldiers regained their morale under the banner of hope. Frustrated by the Parshans decimating his forces, Godheavy commands his war elephants to charge straight through their ranks. Daryon, leading his troops, adopts a calculated formation, baiting the elephants closer to their hidden trap. As the beasts draw near, Daryon abruptly pivots, guiding his men toward the prearranged ambush. By the time Godheavy's forces realize what's happening, it's too late. The Parshans unveil massive catapults, loaded with spear-sized, poison-tipped arrows, and unleash them on the approaching elephants. The projectiles pierce the war elephants, causing them to collapse one by one under the lethal assault. Even as his elephants fall, Godheavy presses forward on his own massive war elephant. Enraged by Daryun's relentless interference, he directs the creature to charge directly at the Black Knight. Daryon dismounts his horse and leaps onto the war elephant, aiming to capture Godheavy himself. However, just as Daryon is about to succeed, Jaswant intervenes, saving Godheavy from certain defeat and pulling him to safety. Hours later, the battle concludes with Arslan and Rajendra emerging victorious. On the other side, Godheavy fumes over the retreat, berating Jaswant and Mahendra for failing to secure victory despite how close it seemed. Mahendra defends Jaswant, explaining that his actions were motivated by loyalty and a desire to protect Godheavy. Godheavy, however, dismisses their efforts with disdain, unwilling to acknowledge their sacrifices. After Godheavy storms off, Mahendra consoles Jaswant, reminding him that he acted nobly in saving his prince, regardless of Godheavy's ingratitude. Their conversation is interrupted when a servant bursts in with urgent news. The king has awoken from his slumber. Godheavy hurries to his father's chambers, where the ailing king demands to see both of his sons. When Godheavy claims that Rajendra is absent from the capital and accuses him of plotting regicide, the king sees through the deception. Unwilling to crown Godheavy outright, he declares that the throne will be decided by a duel between the two brothers, leaving the outcome to divine will. News of the impending duel spreads quickly, and Arslan's camp is soon informed. Rajendra, panicked, turns to Arslan's group for help, imploring Daryon to act as his proxy in the duel. Hearing this, Arslan is both amused and intrigued by Rajendra's audacity, recognizing the cunning prince's desperation to secure his survival. The stage is set for a battle that will determine the future of Sindhura's throne. After hearing Rajendra's plea, Daryon initially declines to serve as his proxy, stating he would only consider it if Arslan explicitly approved. Desperate, Rajendra turned to Arslan, begging him to grant Daryon permission. Arslan hesitated, unsure of the implications, but after some thought, he reluctantly asked Daryon to accept the request. Respecting Arslan's wishes, Daryon agreed to fight on Rajendra's behalf. That evening, Narcissus couldn't resist teasing Daryon about his upcoming duel, pointing out the humor in Daryon fighting to secure Rajendra's ambitions. Joking aside, Narcissus emphasized how a victory would not only bolster Rajendra's position, but also strengthen Arslan's campaign by securing Sindhura's alliance. Daryon, as ever, listened patiently, fully aware of the weight of the task ahead. Meanwhile, at the Sindaran Palace, Godheavy erupted in anger upon learning that Rajendra had chosen Daryon, the fearsome Black Knight, as his proxy. Furious at the thought of being overshadowed, Godheavy resolved to respond with equal force. After deliberating, he decided to select Bahadur, a brutal and unhinged warrior known as the Raging Animal, to fight as his proxy. Mahendra, concerned by Godheavy's choice, warned him about the dangers of relying on someone as unstable as Bahadur. However, Godhevi, blinded by his need to crush Daryun and secure victory, dismissed Mahendra's caution, declaring that he had no alternative. The duel between proxies was shaping up to be a ferocious and pivotal confrontation. Arslan's party arrives at Sindura's capital for the crucial duel, drawing curious stares from citizens but facing no hostility from Godhevi's forces. Rajendra presents Arslan to King Karakala, who offers him a privileged viewing position. When Daryun enters the arena to enthusiastic cheers, Giv and Farangjis discuss Godhevi's situation. The atmosphere changes dramatically when Bahadur appears, breaking his chains with a thunderous roar that echoes through the arena. Arslan's group grows concerned about Daryun's chances against such a formidable opponent. The battle begins with Bahadur charging at Daryun, who manages to wound his opponent's left chest despite the ferocious assault. Unfazed, Bahadur breaks Daryun's sword and hurls him across the arena. Daryun, feigning disadvantage, continues fighting with his broken sword, even landing a second wound. Godhevi begins gloating prematurely to Rajendra, prompting Arslan to confront Rajendra about endangering Daryun. Karakala intervenes, assuring Arslan of the Black Knight's capabilities while expressing disappointment in Godhevi's behavior. Narcissus observes Daryun's strategy unfold. At the crucial moment, Daryun ignites his cape, using the arena's fire, burns Bahadur's face, then seizes the opportunity to plunge a concealed knife into Bahadur's neck, killing him instantly. The shocking victory leads Karakala to declare Rajendra the winner. As Arslan momentarily faints from relief, Godhevi launches an immediate rebellion, ordering his soldiers to attack Rajendra. Arslan's group attempts to escape but encounters Godhevi's forces in the corridor. While Farangjis, Giv, Elam, and Narcissus fight off the soldiers, a lone attacker nearly reaches Arslan. Unexpectedly, Jaswant appears, defeats the soldier, and escorts Arslan to safety. In a crucial moment, Mahendra attempts to reason with Godhevi about accepting their defeat. However, enraged by Mahendra's words, Godhevi delivers a deadly sword strike to him. This shocking act causes the fighting to briefly halt. Daryun then addresses the soldiers, challenging them to stop fighting or face him in another duel. Impressed by his strength, the soldiers declare Daryun their Nani, greatest warrior of the day. Through his arrogance, Godhevi loses not only the battle, but also the loyalty of his soldiers. Rajendra, who becomes the new Sinduran king, commands his men to seize Godhevi. As Godhevi is taken away, Jaswant rushes to Mahendra's side to hear his final words. Mahendra thanks Jaswant for being like a good son and makes him promise to avoid the wrong path in life, hoping to spare him from a fate like his own. As the only person who truly cared for Jaswant takes his last breath, his heartbreaking cries echo throughout the kingdom. In February 321 AD, Rajendra emerges victorious from the duel and becomes Sindura's interim king. He stays by his dying father's side, where Karakala pleads with him to forgive Godhevi's attempt on his life. Rajendra assures his father he won't punish his elder brother. Karakala, grateful for his son's strength of character, smiles before peacefully passing away in his royal bed. Later, thousands of Sinduran citizens in mourning attire gather around the palace to grieve their king's death. Rajendra weeps by his father's coffin, but Narcissus, Daryun, Arslan, and their companions observe how convincingly Rajendra performs grief, even seeming to fool himself about caring for his father. After the funeral ceremonies, Godhevi is released and absolved of charges. He finds Arslan waiting outside his cell and thanks him for securing his release. Arslan dismisses the gratitude and departs, encountering Jaswant on his way. While walking together, Arslan confides in Jaswant about doubting his parentage, yet mentions that Narcissus and Daryun still consider him the best choice to rule Pars. He humbly invites Jaswant to join his cause and fight alongside him. Before Jaswant can respond, Rajendra interrupts to invite Arslan to a banquet honoring Godhevi. During the banquet, Narcissus and the others speculate about Rajendra's true intentions, suspecting he plans to intoxicate Godhevi before eliminating him. Godhevi, visibly distressed, kneels before his brother, begging forgiveness and offering his service. When Arslan arrives to join the festivities, Godhevi, seeing an opportunity for revenge against the one who foiled his plans to reclaim the kingdom, grabs a broken vase shard and charges at him. Azrael the bird intervenes, and Rajendra, seizing the moment, orders his executor to remove this threat to their success. With one swing of his axe, the executor beheads Godhevi. The next day, Rajendra finds Arslan contemplating on his balcony. After thanking him for helping secure his kingship, Rajendra attempts to extract information about Narcissus' strategy against Lusitania through subtle questioning. Fortunately, Arslan himself is unaware of these plans. Though disappointed, Rajendra maintains his composure and offers to grant Arslan any request. When Arslan asks for 500 men for his campaign, Rajendra generously offers 1,000 instead. Later, when his generals question his motives, Rajendra reveals his true plan to betray Arslan, hoping to teach the young prince how difficult it is to become king. Jaswant, secretly listening to this conversation, hurries to inform Arslan's group. As Arslan's party journeys back to Ekbatana, Daryun and Narcissus grow suspicious of Rajendra's soldiers' unusually calm demeanor. They remain vigilant for potential treachery. At nightfall, Rajendra's soldiers attempt their planned ambush on the sleeping Parshan camp. Rajendra, positioned nearby, gives the attack signal, only to discover he's fallen into his own trap. Narcissus and Daryan had anticipated the betrayal and prepared accordingly. Attempting to flee amid the chaos, Rajendra is intercepted by Geev and Ferangis. Arslan regards him with disappointment at this second betrayal. In a final desperate move, Rajendra throws a concealed knife at Arslan, but Jaswant intervenes and blocks it. Once captured, Rajendra faces his humiliated soldiers while maintaining an unrepentant smile, asking about his punishment. Narcissus presents him with two choices: either accompany them, leaving Sindora without leadership for 2 years, or sign a 3-year peace treaty with Pars. Rajendra chooses the treaty and retreats in disgrace. Afterward, Arslan confides in Daryun about his inability to hate Rajendra despite his repeated betrayals. His companions reassure him this isn't a fault. Grateful for such loyal supporters, Arslan's moment is crowned when Jaswant finally appears and pledges his allegiance to Arslan's cause. During a balcony meeting with Hilmaze, known as Silver Mask, Giscard expresses his frustration with Bodin's vengeful tactics. The demands are particularly severe. Bodin insists that Innocentus execute both Tahamane and Andragoras, then publicly confess his sins to their creator and beg the people's forgiveness. While Giscard and Silver Mask initially consider a direct assault on the fortress of Zabel, they hesitate due to its formidable garrison of 30,000 soldiers. Silver Mask offers to handle the situation, earning Giscard's gratitude. Later, Silver Mask summons Sam to his office to discuss strategies for defeating Bodin and his forces. While Silver Mask advocates for a diplomatic solution, Sam proposes a direct military confrontation with the 30,000 soldiers, arguing it would not only aid Giscard, but also enhance their credibility among the people. Silver Mask acknowledges the wisdom in Sam's reasoning before dismissing him. Sam heads to the dungeons after leaving Silver Mask's office, reflecting on pivotal moments from the Lusitanian-Parshan War and recalling Hilmi's words upon his awakening from his coma. After bribing a guard for time with Andragoras, Sam confronts him about the truth. Did he assassinate his elder brother Osros and attempt to burn Hilmi's alive? Andragoras responds with laughter, declaring Sam unworthy of knowing the complete story. Looking into Andragoras' lifeless eyes, Sam departs. Meanwhile, Hilmis requests Giscard's permission to assemble a Parshan army to attack Zabel. After receiving approval, he meets Sam in the corridor to discuss their revenge plans against Andragoras and Arslan. They gather an impressive force of 30,000 Parshans, leaving Giscard wondering how many will return. Their first stop is a small village where Sam inquires about a one-eyed giant known for his love of women and wine. His suspicions lead them to Kubard, a former Parshan cavalry commander living in a cave. The old warriors reunite warmly, with Kubard content in his peaceful disgrace amidst wine and women. Sam persuades him to join Hilmis' mission against Zabel. The fortress of Zabel, perched atop a craggy mountain, presents a unique challenge. Hilmis provokes Bodin by burning a holy flag, successfully baiting him to send his forces out. The Parsians execute their strategy perfectly, letting the enemy approach before launching a devastating arrow assault followed by a charge. After hours of fighting, Hilmis' forces emerge victorious and return to camp to plan the fortress assault. During their discussion, Kubard questions Hilms about his plans for ruling the kingdom. Unsatisfied with Hilms' generic response, Kubard later confides in Sam that he must leave, foreseeing an inevitable throne conflict between Hilmis and Arslan after Pars is reclaimed from Lusitania. He bids farewell to Sam with a prayer for his fortune. Meanwhile, at Peshawar Fortress, Arslan issues a formal decree to defeat Lusitania and abolish slavery after the war. With the declaration made, all that remains is to wait for generals from across the land to join his cause. In April 321 AD, war generals and lords gather at Peshawar to pledge allegiance to Arslan's cause. While Ferangis marvels at the number of generals supporting Arslan, Narcissus and Daryan harbor concerns about potential resistance to Arslan's anti-slavery stance. Narcissus advises Daryan to focus instead on the mounting tensions among the soldiers. That evening, an incident occurs when Lord Zaravant harasses Jaswant, who has been newly appointed as Arslan's personal bodyguard. The confrontation nearly escalates until General Lucien intervenes. Upon learning of this, Arslan consults Narcissus and Daryun for advice. Narcissus recommends stripping Zaravant of his position as satrap and appointing Lucien instead, suggesting this would strengthen the soldiers' faith in Arslan's leadership and reduce discord. Though difficult, Arslan makes this decision for the greater good. The next day, a crucial meeting convenes with Narcissus, Daryun, Arslan, Pharangis, and other war generals to discuss Hilmiz's campaign. Narcissus outlines Hilmiz's past transgressions and advocates for stopping his campaign by any means necessary. While the assembly agrees, Arslan surprises everyone by expressing understanding for Hilmiz's desire for revenge. Narcissus acknowledges this perspective but urges Arslan to maintain his resolve to defeat Hilmiz and claim the Partian throne. Arslan requests time to organize his thoughts and reach a firm decision. Following the meeting, Narcissus and Daryan encounter Give lounging on a corridor balcony, where he shares insights about Dragoris's reign and misdeeds. Meanwhile, Arslan continues his solitary contemplation on another balcony, weighing these heavy matters. Hilms and his army successfully breach Zabul Fortress, only to discover Baudin has abandoned his soldiers and fled. Despite victory, tensions emerge among the troops. Etoile overhears his men speaking disrespectfully about him, but chooses to silently take their guard duty instead of confronting them. Later, by the riverside, he reflects on his relationship with Lord Barcacion, who had tried to protect him from battle, forcing Etoile to rebel for the sake of his pride and family. Making a bold decision, Etoile removes his helmet, revealing long blonde hair that gives him a feminine appearance, and prepares to infiltrate the Partian camp disguised as a woman. Entering Peshawar Fortress, Etoile plays the role of a wine server, carefully gathering intelligence from increasingly drunk soldiers. When they begin boisterously celebrating their victory over Lusitania, Etoile retreats outside, privately raging at their disrespect. A chance encounter with Alfarid leads to a conversation about Narcissus, whom she praises as the most beautiful being ever. After she leaves, Etoile fends off an aggressive drunk soldier, catching Arslan's attention. Arslan, taking an evening walk, fails to recognize his old friend in female disguise. He helps dispose of the unconscious soldier and offers to help Etoile escape. During their escape, Arslan opens up about his motivations for fighting Lusitania, mentioning a friend he met 4 years ago. Unaware he's speaking to Prince Arslan, Etoile advises the white-haired boy not to burden himself with matters that should concern only the king, dismissing him as a pampered youth. Arslan simply smiles in agreement. Before hiding Etoile in a merchant's carriage for safe passage out, Etoile earnestly warns Arslan to stay alive through the coming war. Arslan nods and returns to the fortress. The next day, Arslan declares his resolution to his subjects. He will fight to become king of Pars, not from desire for power, but from his commitment to serve as the rightful heir and protect his people. Later that day, Narcissus and Daryan met to review the state of the army and their preparations since Daryan's recent demotion. Narcissus noted that the soldiers seemed more at ease, accepting Arslan's leadership and decisions with minimal resistance. As the two walked and talked, their conversation was interrupted by a commotion nearby. Lord Zaravant, alongside his fellow generals Tus and Isfan, was harassing Jaswant once again. Zaravant's insults grew increasingly harsh, but Narcissus and Daryan chose to observe rather than intervene, curious to see how the situation would unfold. Before the confrontation could escalate further, Jeeves stepped in, strumming a soothing melody on his banjo guitar to grab everyone's attention. He followed this with calming words, attempting to diffuse the tension. However, rather than pacifying Zaravant, Give's intervention only seemed to fuel his frustration. At that point, Narcissus stepped forward to de-escalate the situation. Zaravant accused Narcissus of keeping him and his companions in the back lines due to a lack of trust in their abilities. Narcissus reassured him that their placement was based on strategic necessity rather than doubt. Satisfied with the explanation, Zaravant and his companions backed down. Later, Narcissus and Daryan regrouped in the war room to address the growing unrest within the army. While Narcissus suggested a measured approach, Daryan remained concerned about the potential consequences of the descent. After much deliberation, the two devised a plan to quell the tension among the soldiers, ensuring stability within the ranks. Meanwhile, Kubard was en route to Peshawar Fortress. Along the way, he was ambushed by soldiers loyal to Zande. Undeterred, Kubard quickly eliminated the attackers and continued his journey to the fortress. By nightfall, as the soldiers at the fortress relaxed and bonded, a more personal confrontation emerged. Isfan, later revealed to be the brother of the late cavalry captain Shapur, sought out Give. Consumed by grief, Isfan demanded an apology from Give for his role in Shapur's death. Give, however, refused to offer any such thing. Instead, he mocked Isfan's origins, provoking him further. Furious, Isfan challenged Give to a fight. The two engaged in a heated duel, drawing the attention of the camp. Ferengis and others intervened to stop the fight before it spiraled out of control. When Arslan arrived, he demanded an explanation for the chaos. Give, true to his nature, responded with dismissive and insulting remarks. Enraged by Give's behavior, Daryun scolded him harshly, striking him on the head for his disrespect. Even then, Give remained indifferent. Arslan, having had enough, made a decisive call. He banished Give from the fortress, ordering him to leave and reflect on his actions. The unexpected decision stunned everyone in the camp, as it demonstrated Arslan's fairness and willingness to prioritize harmony within the ranks. The dissension that had plagued the soldiers seemed to dissipate in that moment, replaced by renewed respect for Arslan's leadership. Hours later, Arslan meets with Ferengis, Daryun, and Narcissus to express regret over assigning Give a seemingly demeaning mission. Daryun reassures him, revealing he also tasked Give with finding someone during his absence. The next day, Arslan's army begins their march toward the keep of Saint Emmanuel to confront Hilmes and the Lusitanians, announcing their arrival with a battle cry. Upon hearing of Arslan's advance, Guiscard learns Hilmes hasn't returned from Zabul, but remains confident he won't miss the opportunity to engage Arslan's forces. That evening, during a strategy meeting in Arslan's tent, Narcissus outlines their plan to pass the keep of Saint Emmanuel, mentioning the enemy-held Chasum fortress along their route. When Zaravant, Isfan, and Tus request permission to attack the fortress to prove themselves, Arslan explicitly forbids it, wanting to avoid unnecessary casualties. However, the next day, the trio defies orders, their pride leading them to underestimate the fortress's defenses. The enemy, well prepared, springs their trap, unleashing a devastating barrage upon the approaching forces. Upon hearing of their predicament, Arslan immediately organizes a rescue mission. While Zaravant and some soldiers manage to escape, locating them proves challenging until Give's distinctive banjo guitar music signals their position. Following the sound, Arslan's forces find and rescue their trapped comrades, defeating the Chasum soldiers. The trio is deeply moved by Arslan's dedication to saving them, and he affirms that they're as valuable to him as his closest advisors, Narcissus and Daryun. Meanwhile, Ferengis, showing signs of attraction to Give, finds him for a conversation. Give maintains his playful demeanor, sharing some wine before departing again. Gikar receives intelligence from his scouts about Arslan's forces. While rumors suggest 60,000 troops, they believe the actual number is closer to 40,000. To counter any strategies Narcissus might employ, Gikar orders the preparation of a 70,000-strong army. When his generals protest the excessive number, Hilmes intervenes, reminding them of his 30,000 troops from the Zabul campaign. He requests Gikard's 70,000 men to ensure Arslan's complete defeat. After careful consideration, Gikard agrees, though Hilmes deflects questions about his specific plans, asking only for trust. That evening, Elam and Alfarid conduct a covert mission in the royal capital to gather intelligence about Hilmes's plans. When confronted by royal guards, Alfarid quickly improvises, pretending she and Elam are lovers in the midst of a quarrel. The ruse succeeds, and they proceed to a crowded pub where soldiers are celebrating. Inside, they observe tensions rising between Partian and Lusitanian soldiers when the Partians' enthusiastic victory celebration provokes jealousy among the Lusitanians. Having gathered their intelligence, Elam and Alfarid depart, their journey back punctuated by yet another argument about Narcissus, though they manage to return safely. Meanwhile, Hilmes visits Andragoras in his underground prison cell to boast about his imminent victory. However, Andragoras responds with mocking laughter, chiding Hilmes for his ignorance about the true nature of Pars's royal family. His cryptic words suggest a generational curse compelling each royal generation to shed innocent blood. Hilmes departs in irritation, disturbed by Andragoras's words. As Hilmes and his forces move to the battleground, Arslan's camp analyzes the intelligence gathered from Elam and Alfarid's reconnaissance, forcing them to revise their strategy knowing Sam fights for Hilmes. The next morning, Daryun and Arslan engage in sword training. Though Daryun prevails, Arslan shows improvement. Afterward, Arslan notices novice soldiers and directs veterans to train them. Meanwhile, Daryun finds Narcissus and discusses their loyalty to Arslan. When Narcissus poses a hypothetical about Arslan's defeat, Daryun firmly dismisses such thoughts, asserting Arslan's eventual victory. That evening, Arslan discovers Narcissus working on a still life painting and takes the opportunity to inquire about their foot soldiers. Narcissus reveals their background as former slaves, moving Arslan to pledge better conditions for them after defeating Hilmes. Their conversation ends with Arslan's heartfelt gratitude, and Narcissus playfully reminds him of their agreement, which Arslan acknowledges with a smile. Elsewhere, Pharangis discusses Give's travels with the two young companions, assuring them that despite his physical absence, his loyalty remains with Arslan. Meanwhile, at the keep of Saint Emmanuel, Etoile meets with Count Barcassian, expressing concern over the Parsians' proximity to the fortress. Barcassian responds by sharing Innocentis's war directives. As Etoile exits, Hilmaz's army arrives at the keep to prepare for battle. At dawn, Arslan's forces reach the edge of Saint Emmanuel's keep. They pause to observe the imposing walls and offer prayers before beginning their advance. As Arslan's forces advance toward the keep of Saint Emmanuel, they pause to set up camp and revisit their strategy. Arslan voiced his concerns about the sheer size of Hilmaz's army, worried about the odds stacked against them. Narcissus, ever composed, reassured him that their plans were already in motion. He tasked Daryun with finalizing preparations, prompting Daryun to leave the camp and attend to his duties. Despite Narcissus's reassurances, Arslan continued to fret, but Narcissus advised him to trust his commanders and focus on the bigger picture. Meanwhile, within the keep, Hilms donned his armor, readying himself for the impending battle. He rallied his soldiers with a fiery speech, bolstering their morale as they prepared to face Arslan's army. At the gates of the keep of Saint Emmanuel, Arslan's forces began deploying a battering ram to breach the fortress. However, the Lusitanian defenders had anticipated their move. To Arslan's dismay, his commanders were shocked to discover Sam aiding the Lusitanians against them. Elam quickly returned to camp to report the troubling news to Arslan. Listening calmly, Arslan acknowledged the situation and assured Elam that they had accounted for this possibility, urging him to stay focused. Elsewhere, Etoile confronted Barcassian, frustrated by being kept out of the battle. Etoile demanded to join the fight, defying Barcassian's attempts to pacify him with advice to trust in fate. Tired of being sidelined, Etoile declared his intention to fight with or without Barcassian's approval before storming off. In another corner of the camp, Pharangis and Alpharid shared a quiet conversation. Alpharid confided her admiration for Narcissus, admitting she was in love with him, though she also remained committed to Arslan's cause. She explained that her belief in Arslan stemmed from a feeling that he was destined for greatness, and she wanted to support him as he rose to fulfill that destiny. Pharangis listened silently, her own thoughts about Arslan and the path ahead lingering unspoken. The battle at the keep of Saint Emmanuel intensifies when Zande, Karlin's son, leads his forces against Arslan's army. Daryun commands his troops to engage, and both armies clash as they charge down the hill. While the Parsian elite warriors decimate enemy ranks, Kishward attempts a strategic move through the keep's aqueducts, only to find Sam and his forces waiting in ambush. Despite defeating two initial attackers, Kishward ends up in direct combat with Sam. During their fight, Kishward questions Sam's allegiance to Hilmes, but Sam explains his dedication to preserving Pars's royal bloodline. Hilmes, learning of Zande's unauthorized attack, curses his insubordination. The battle rages on with mounting casualties on both sides. Etoile attempts to convert soldiers to the faith of Yaldabaoth, but faces violent rejection, getting unseated from his horse. Spotting Elam using a secret passage, Etoile follows him. Meanwhile, Zande's forces charge toward the Parsian main base, only to find empty tents, a trap. Parsian archers emerge, raining arrows upon Zande's men, while Narcissus observes his strategy unfolding perfectly. During his retreat, Zande encounters Daryun, leading to an intense duel. Simultaneously, Sam and Kishward continue their fight until reinforcements arrive. Daryun attempts to reason with Zande during a pause in their combat, but Zande refuses dialogue and charges with his spear. Daryun evades and delivers a critical wound to Zande's side. The Earth Sorcerer appears and rescues the unconscious Zande. The battle takes an unexpected turn when Etoile and his forces confront Arslan's army. Etoile challenges Arslan directly, but his world shatters upon realizing that the spoiled rich kid he'd previously dismissed is actually the crown prince of Pars. Even after learning the truth about the spoiled noble, Etoile refuses to accept it. When reality finally sinks in, he draws his sword and charges at Arslan. Elam quickly intervenes, shielding Arslan from Etoile's blade. Moments later, Narcissus, Alpharid, and Pharangis arrive to prevent Etoile from causing further harm. Realizing he is outnumbered, Etoile flees the tent, mounting his horse and escaping into the night. Before Alfred gives chase, Narcissus instructs her to discreetly follow Etoile and uncover the hidden passage he used to avoid alerting the palace guards. Once Alfarid departs, Narcissus returns to Arslan's tent and commends Elam for his bravery in protecting the prince. Elam smiles, reassuring Arslan not to worry too much about him. Meanwhile, as Etoile rides back to the village, his turbulent thoughts keep him unaware of Alfarid tailing him. Unintentionally, he leads her to the secret passageway that provides entry to the fortress. That night, after Daryan returns from his skirmish, he rushes to Arslan, seeking answers about the recent attack on his life. Arslan explains the encounter with his old friend Etoile and expresses his desire to join the battlefield the following day. Determined, they all prepare for the next decisive move. By nightfall, they march toward the keep, reaching its outskirts just before dawn. News from Alfarid confirms the discovery of the secret entry, setting the stage for a critical confrontation. As the moment of battle draws near, Arslan gathers his soldiers. Clenching his fist, he delivers an impassioned speech, inspiring his troops to give their all in this final fight, the battle that will decide their fate. As the first light of dawn breaks, Arslan raises his voice in a thunderous battle cry, "Yasha Suin!" The soldiers charge forward, engaging the Lusitanians, who retaliate with a rain of arrows from atop the fortress walls. The decisive clash has begun. Believing they hold the upper hand, the Lusitanians are blindsided when Alfarid and her small army infiltrate the fortress undetected. They launch a surprise attack on the archers stationed atop the walls, swiftly eliminating them and opening the gates for the Parthians to storm inside. Witnessing this, Sam and his men desperately attempt to block the advancing Parthian forces. But the Parthians, led by Arslan, Daryan, and Narcissus, press forward with unyielding resolve. As they push deeper into the fortress, Arslan's group encounters resistance and is temporarily surrounded by enemy soldiers. Just when the situation appears dire, Kubard arrives unexpectedly, offering his assistance. Grateful for the support, Arslan thanks Kubard before resuming his charge toward Hilmaz's stronghold. At the entrance, Sam and his soldiers stand ready, resulting in an intense clash as the two sides collide. Amid the chaos, Narcissus engages Sam in combat, while Daryan and Arslan manage to slip into the building in pursuit of Hilmes. Meanwhile, the women of the fortress, horrified by the sight of their men falling to the Parthians, turn to their deity, Yalda Baoth, in prayer. Inside the building, Arslan and Daryun are ambushed by a hail of arrows fired by Hilmes' soldiers. They take cover, waiting for the enemy to deplete their arrows. However, Pharangus arrives with her characteristic composure, picking off the soldiers one by one with precision. With the threat neutralized, Arslan and Daryan proceed to Hilmes' quarters, where they find him and his subordinates awaiting them. Hilmes scowls at Arslan, bitterly noting the presence of the Black Knight, Daryan. Ignoring the hostility, Arslan asks to hear Hilmes' grievances. Hilmes launches into a tirade about his suffering and the injustices he has faced, but Arslan responds with calm conviction, reminding him that pain is not unique to any one person. He shares his own struggles, emphasizing that hardship cannot deter him from his duty to the people of Pars. Infuriated by Arslan's words, Hilmes raises his sword, prepared to fight. Daryan steps forward, ready to defend Arslan, and the two men engage in a fierce battle. Their clash leads to both Daryun and Hilmes tumbling off the balcony. With Hilmes gone, Arslan turns to Barcasion, one of Hilmes' remaining allies, for a final discussion. Resigned to defeat, Barcasion admits his loss and praises Arslan, calling him a kind and noble king for showing compassion even toward his enemies. As the battle rages on, Daryun and Hilmes engage in a fierce duel amidst the courtyard fountains. Their prolonged fight pushes them to desperate measures as each warrior risks everything for a decisive strike. After their final devastating charge, Daryun falls to his knees, overwhelmed by his injuries. Though also wounded, Hilmes remains standing, sustained by the Dark Earth Sorcerer's power surrounding him. The scene fades to black as Daryun collapses. Following the Lusitanian defeat at the keep, Etoile wanders disoriented until memories of Barcasion prompt him to head for the tower. While Kishward and his forces begin tending to the fallen, an alarming sight stops them cold. Women begin leaping to their deaths from the clock tower. Barcasion follows suit from his own building. Etoile arrives just as Barcasion falls from the railings, with Arslan clutching a knife nearby. Acting on instinct, Etoile launches an attack on Arslan, who skillfully defends himself and manages to knock off Etoile's helmet. In that moment, Arslan is stunned to recognize Etoile as the very same girl he had once helped escape from the guards. Blinded by rage, Etoile continues attacking Arslan, accusing him of murdering the Count. Despite Arslan's attempts to explain, Etoile remains violent, eventually pinning him down and raising her sword for the kill. Fortunately, Pharangus intervenes just in time to save Arslan's life. In the aftermath of the battle, Arslan orders his troops to tend to the wounded Lusitanians within the keep. He then hurries to find Daryan, discovering him injured but thankfully still mobile. Meanwhile, Narcissus investigates the food storage silo, where a soldier opens a hatch for dry goods. To everyone's surprise, Alfarid tumbles out with the grain, landing safely on the pile below. Narcissus greets her with a warm smile, causing her to blush as she questions his interest in the keep's provisions. After sharing some miscellaneous information, Narcissus departs from the silo. Following treatment of his wounds by Jaswant, Daryun regains his footing. When Jaswant questions why Hilmes spared him, Daryun suspects they haven't yet seen Hilmes' true intentions. Kishwart arrives to jest about Daryun's injuries, but Daryun simply retrieves his sword and resumes his duties. Meanwhile, Kubard and Pharangis celebrate their victory with drinks on a high balcony of the keep. Arslan visits Etoile's cell with food, facing initial resistance before managing to explain the truth about Count Barcassion's death. Though Etoile accepts this explanation, she continues to criticize his religion and Pors's paganism while eagerly consuming the meal. After finishing, she finally reveals her true identity. She's actually a girl named Estelle, born into a family of knights. She explains how she chose to become a knight to earn respect in the army, given her challenging position as a woman. She then confesses to picturing Arslan as a horned demon, admitting the reality differs greatly from her imagination. In response, Arslan confronts her about Lusitania's misuse of religion to justify violence and massacres. This triggers an outburst from Etoile, who demands he leave. Arslan apologizes for the upset and departs, but not before leaving the cell door open and requesting that she pray for her fallen Lusitanian comrades the next day. At dawn, Pharangis performs a solemn elegy for the fallen Lusitanian soldiers. After her song ends, Arslan calls upon Etoile to offer prayers for her countrymen. She steps forward with her holy book, offering heartfelt prayers for the deceased Lusitanian warriors. Meanwhile, in Ecbatana, Giscard erupts in fury upon learning of the keep's swift fall to Arslan's forces. As he berates Hilmes for his ineffective defense, Hilmes himself appears and reveals his true identity, the son of Osros and legitimate heir to Par's throne. He proposes an alliance. In exchange for Guiscard's help in claiming the Partian throne, Hilmes would assist Guiscard in becoming Lusitania's king. Guiscard, intrigued by the proposition, accepts the deal. As these events unfold, Narcissus oversees the burning of Saint Emmanuel's keep. Arslan and his company depart with Lusitanian survivors, watching the fortress burn behind them. During their journey to the capital, Etoile attempts to bandage a wounded soldier, but only worsens his injury through her clumsy efforts. Fortunately, Elam steps in to properly dress the wound. That evening at camp, Etoile hurries to fetch water for a pregnant woman, encountering Pharangis at the water source. Their conversation turns to Arslan, with Etoile questioning the deep loyalty he inspires. Pharangis simply explains that Arslan's constant striving to better himself for others earns him such devotion. Later that night, Arslan finds Etoile feeding the children, and his sudden appearance earns him a playful ear-pulling and scolding from her. The next morning brings joy as the pregnant woman delivers a healthy baby boy, moving Etoile to tears as she cradles the newborn. Soon after, Arslan's group resumes their journey to the royal capital. Arslan reflects on this being their longest and most crucial campaign yet, sharing a lighthearted moment with Narcissus and Daryun as they march to reclaim their homeland. Meanwhile, Give travels alone on his personal pilgrimage, contemplating the war's outcome. Over a few weeks, Arslan and his party were forced to abandon their campaign to reclaim Pars from Guiscard and his brother. This change in plans came after the Kingdom of Turan took advantage of Arslan's absence to invade the Peshawar fortress. To ensure his base of operations remained secure, Arslan swiftly returned to Peshawar to defend it from the Turanians. Meanwhile, Hilmes shifted his focus from fighting Arslan for the throne of Pars to seeking peace for his restless mind. One evening, Hilmes visited his sorcerer to discuss an urgent matter. After listening to Hilmes, the sorcerer rebuked him for revealing his true identity to Giscard. Hilmes, however, dismissed the criticism, seeing no disgrace in his actions if it meant securing his deal with Guiscard. The conversation shifted as the sorcerer revealed the existence of the sword of the legendary hero Kekusra, Ruknabad. The sword, known for its legendary powers, was said to be a priceless artifact for any king. Hilmes was stunned, believing the sword had been lost, and demanded to know its whereabouts. The sorcerer cryptically told him that if he truly was a descendant of Kaikusra, he would be able to wield it. Elsewhere, Arslan and his party finally returned to the Peshawar fortress, where they found the Turanians attempting to breach its defenses. Wasting no time, Arslan's forces moved into attack formation and launched a surprise assault from behind. The battle between Turan and Arslan's army raged for hours. The fortress soldiers, overjoyed by the return of their crowned prince, fought with renewed vigor. Under Narcissus's command, Pharangis and the rest of the army encircled and trapped the Turanians, making it difficult for them to counterattack. During the skirmish, Kubard narrowly avoided defeat, when Jaswant stepped in to save him. After suffering the loss of thousands of soldiers, the Turanian commander ordered a retreat, leaving Arslan victorious in defending the fortress. Following the battle, Arslan convenes with Lucian, the fortress's interim lord, to discuss recent events. They ponder Rajendra's absence during their call for aid, with Arslan deducing that Rajendra likely withheld support, hoping both armies would deplete their forces. Despite this, Arslan expresses gratitude for his men's survival. Later that evening, Darian finds Narcissus deep in thought on a balcony. When questioned, Narcissus voices his concerns about Ecbatana's unusual silence, particularly their lack of pursuit after the army's withdrawal. Meanwhile, Elam assists Arslan in his chambers, where the young prince confesses his exhaustion and yearning for Give's musical comfort. At that very moment, Give rests in a forest, lamenting his solitude. His contemplation is interrupted when he spots Hilmaz and his forces heading toward Kuikusra's tomb to claim the legendary sword. Hilmaz, accompanied by Xande and a small group, enters the tomb, pays respects, and retrieves the sword of Ruknabad. Giivi intervenes, challenging Hilmaz and successfully stealing the sword, declaring only Arslan worthy of wielding it. As Xande pursues Giivi, Bodin's temple knights appear and seize Ruknabad from both parties. Give, content that Hilmaz failed to secure the artifact, retreats to his hideout. In Ecbatana, Giscard and 2 guards visit Andragoras in his underground prison, seeking information about Hilmaz. Instead of answering, Andragoras breaks his chains, revealing he'd weakened them over years by applying sweat and soup to corrode the metal. Meanwhile, Etoile, disguised as a man, arrives in Ecbatana with refugees, reminiscing about her final moments with Arslan. She enters a capital in chaos as Andragoras reclaims his throne. After defeating Giscard and returning to power, Andragoras requests an audience with his wife, Tehemene. Upon entering the hall, she breaks down, pleading with Andragoras to return their child to her, expressing her deep longing for their son. Andragoras departs Ecbatana, with Giscard as his prisoner, but Lusitanian knights soon pursue them. He releases Giscard to his soldiers before continuing alone, seeking to build a larger army. Meanwhile, the Turanian king harshly reprimands his men for their weakness against the Parsians, while planning a full-force attack on the fortress. Jisma, their recently returned general, reports intelligence about Parsians gathering 10,000 additional soldiers from the south. The Turanian king, amused, orders an immediate siege on Peshawar to preempt their reinforcement. That night, Arslan's forces prepare for the impending battle as King Tokyomesh announces his intentions to pillage the fortress. The situation intensifies when Elam reveals the king's brutal strategy, executing villagers to draw out Arslan. The plan succeeds as Arslan, witnessing his people's slaughter, emotionally confronts the Turanian king from the fortress walls and declares war. He then leads his forces into battle alongside Dariun. Jisma, waiting in ambush, attacks an approaching army without verification, unknowingly engaging his own forces in the darkness. Dariun efficiently dispatches Turanian soldiers while Arslan and Jaswant confront the Turanian king directly. As other knights join to protect their king, Give and Farangius arrive to assist. When the king pins Arslan down, Give's well-aimed arrow unseats him. The king orders an attack on Give, but Dariun's arrival provides support. Narcissus reveals his strategic manipulation when it becomes clear that Jisma's forces had been fighting their own men. Despite this revelation, the Turanian king refuses surrender until Lord Tarkhan's defeat by Dariun finally forces his retreat. The Parsian victory echoes across the land while Jisma acknowledges his unwitting role in their plan. During the aftermath, Give shares information about the legendary Ruknabad sword and playfully accuses Kubard of stealing Farangis, while Narcissus and Darian ponder Hilma's interest in the sword. At the Turanian camp, General Idarish executes the king for retreating and claims the throne. Meanwhile, Arslan honors Tus for his role in Narcissus' strategy. The celebration is interrupted by news of King Andragoras' arrival. Upon reaching Peshawar, Andragoras immediately reasserts his authority, and, despite Darian's protests, orders Arslan to depart on a mission to gather 50,000 soldiers to help reclaim their kingdom from the Lusitanians. During his pursuit of the temple knights who stole the sword, Hilmaz encounters Princess Irina of Mariam, a longtime ally of Pars. From their hillside vantage point, he and Xande witness bandits from the Zot clan attacking Irina's party. They swiftly intervene, driving the attackers away. When Irina, who is blind, reveals she's searching for Prince Hilmaz of Pars, she unknowingly stands before him. Though she recognizes his voice, Hims denies his identity, instead giving her an insignia and directing her to seek protection in Zabul before departing to continue his search. As they ride onward, Xande questions Hilmaz about dismissing Mariam's importance. Hilmaz curtly reminds him to mind his own affairs, prompting Xande's silence. This moment triggers Hilmaz's memories of the aftermath of Andragoras' betrayal. In his recollection, a younger Hilmaz awakens in a modest house days after suffering facial burns from his uncle's fire. Still disoriented, he questions his mysterious savior, who resembles the Earth Sorcerer. The man refuses to reveal his name, describing himself only as one who thrives in chaos. He explains his motivation for healing Hilma's stems from the chaos that would ensue when Hilma seeks vengeance for his father's death. After this exchange, Hilms drifts to sleep and finds himself transported to Mariam. In Mariam, young Hidim is trained relentlessly, driven by his thirst for vengeance, until the local lord had to intervene, fearing his intense regimen would reveal his true identity. Following his master's advice, Hilms retreats to a quieter training spot, where he encounters the blind Arena in a flower garden. He shares a moment with her, describing a flower called Zaria, his detailed descriptions bringing a smile to her face. When she asks his name and attempts to touch his face, he winces from his still tender wound. Their interaction is cut short by her caretaker's arrival, but this meeting marks the beginning of their secret encounters, with Hilmes regularly sneaking out to spend time with her. As their relationship deepens and Arena's feelings grow, Hilmes eventually confides his true identity, promising to return for her once he claims his rightful place as King of Pars. The turning point comes one night when the sorcerer visits Hilmes' chamber, announcing the time has come to begin his quest for revenge and updating him on Pars' current state. However, this moment is interrupted when the Lord of the Mansion, accompanied by guards, attempts to capture Hilmes to surrender him to the attacking Lusitanian forces. Refusing captivity, Hilmes fights his way through them all. In the hallway, he discovers 3 guards threatening Arena and her caretaker. After renewing his promise to return to Arena, he dispatches the guards and departs to commence his journey of vengeance. As Hilmes returns from his memories, Lord Sam arrives with intelligence about the Temple Knight's location. Meanwhile, at Peshawar, Andragoras remains firm on Arslan's banishment, which the prince accepts with dignity despite his heavy heart. When Narsus and Daryun request to accompany Arslan, Andragoras firmly denies their petition. Following this decree, Narsus, Daryun, and Jaswant gather to discuss the king's puzzling decisions, while Giev and Farangis voice their frustration at being separated from Pars. As Arslan takes a final longing look at the fortress before departing, Andragoras summons Kishward to test his loyalty. Kishward, choosing prudence, pledges his allegiance to the king. Meanwhile, Narsus and Daryan find themselves confined to a room, where Daryan anxiously awaits Narcissus' strategy. Aware of eavesdropping soldiers outside, Narcissus writes down his escape plan rather than speaking it. Once the plan is communicated, his people spring into action, starting a fire that throws the fortress into chaos. Taking advantage of the confusion, Arslan's 7 loyal subjects make their escape. At the exit, they encounter Kishward and his men, where Kishward cleverly stages a losing battle against Daryun to allow their escape while maintaining his cover with Andragoras. The group of 7 sets out in search of Arslan, with Azrael the bird guiding their way. By dawn, they reunite with their prince, who expresses profound joy and relief at seeing his loyal followers again. With his trusted companions by his side once more, Arslan feels secure enough to continue their journey toward Galan, the coastal city in the south. As Arslan and his 7 loyal subjects approach Galan, their journey is interrupted by an attempted robbery by the Zot clan. The situation quickly transforms when Alfarid steps forward, revealing herself to her former clan members. Recognizing their lady, the clan members become escorts, guiding the group safely to the port city. Upon parting, they express gratitude to Narcissus for protecting Alfarid and pledge their allegiance to Arslan, offering their services whenever needed. Arslan experiences his first glimpse of the ocean, a moment of pure joy shared with his companions who helped fulfill this dream. The group then explores the city's bustling market, nearly losing themselves among the exotic goods until Farangis recalls them to their purpose. At the docks, Arslan observes slave masters directing their workers, prompting Narcissus to mention his old friend Shagad who lives nearby. They proceed to Shagad's residence, where Narcissus's unusually relaxed behavior with his old friend surprises even his closest companions. Shagad welcomes them warmly, offering his assistance to Arslan's cause. During the evening meal, their discussion turns to Pars's current situation. When Arslan requests help gathering the 50,000 soldiers his father demands, Shagad agrees to approach the city's viceroy. However, he warns that Arslan's slave abolition decree might face resistance in Galan, where the economy heavily depends on slave labor. When Give questions Shagad's personal stance on slavery, Shagad claims to share their anti-slavery views, though his sincerity remains uncertain. After dinner, Narcissus sat down with his old friend Shagad for a private discussion. Shagad began by teasing Narcissus about his wife, Alfarid, before steering the conversation toward Arslan's ambitious plan to abolish slavery. As their discussion deepened, Narcissus began to suspect that Shagad himself was involved in keeping slaves. When confronted, Shagad didn't deny it. Instead, he tried to persuade Narcissus to see Arslan's vision as impractical, calling it immature and unrealistic. Narcissus, disappointed by his friend's stance, decided to cut the conversation short to avoid saying something he might regret. Before leaving, he sought assurance of Shagad's loyalty to the rightful heir of Pars. Shagad reassured him, albeit with an air of insincerity, and Narcissus departed with a heavy heart. The following day, a renowned ship led by Captain Grays docked at the port of Galan. Meanwhile, Arslan and his party gathered in the Viceroy's building to meet with Pelagius, the Viceroy of Galan. Pelagius was a talkative man, bursting into the room full of energy and words. After treating the group to a feast and rambling about inconsequential matters, he finally got serious and spoke about the region's persistent pirate problem. He described the pirates' relentless attacks on merchant ships, both day and night, and became so emotional that he left the room in tears. Despite his peculiar behavior, Arslan and his group took his concerns seriously. Moments later, Pharangus noticed commotion at the docks and alerted everyone. From the Viceroy's building, they could see Captain Grays' ship under attack by 2 pirate vessels. Unable to act immediately, they watched as the pirates boarded Grays' ship, intent on looting it. However, before the situation worsened, Arslan and his party arrived on a smaller ship and launched a counterattack against the pirates. The battle was intense, but swift. Arslan's warriors overpowered the pirates, sending their ships to the bottom of the sea with a resounding "Arr!" Daryon, in particular, unleashed his terrifying gaze upon the remaining pirates, causing them to flee in fear. Grays, witnessing the display of strength and bravery, expressed his gratitude to Arslan and his companions for saving his ship and crew. After their skirmish with the troublemakers, Grays and his men formally thanked Daryon's group for their intervention. During their conversation, Daryon reveals Arslan's identity as the Crown Prince of Pars, leaving Grays momentarily stunned. Recovering quickly, he invites everyone to a nearby tavern for drinks. There, when Narcissus and Arslan present their request for 50,000 soldiers, Grays explains the significant time and financial resources such an endeavor would require. However, grateful for their earlier assistance with his ship, he agrees to become their financial backer, raising a toast to their new alliance. With Grays secured as an ally, their attention turns to Pelagius, though his excessive talking makes him a questionable partner. Nevertheless, they decide to proceed, with Narcissus enlisting Pharangus, Give, and Jaswant as key players in his scheme, also requesting Grays' assistance. The details of the plan remain concealed as the scene fades. The story shifts to Viceroy Pelagius entrusting a court maiden with an important document containing evidence of his illegal activities, cautioning her about potential followers. Shortly after her departure, Grays arrives introducing a captured lady from Serica, actually Pharangus in disguise, as a gift. Pelagius, failing to recognize Pharangus, eagerly accepts the offering and joins her and Jaswant, posing as her attendant, for food and drink. Pharangus strategically plies him with alcohol until his guard drops, then begins probing him with incriminating questions. At the Gilan Archive of Records, Jeev intercepts the court maiden carrying Pelagius's document. His charm persuades her to surrender the incriminating papers, even earning him a kiss. He then signals Jaswant and Pharangus through Pelagius's window. Pharangus immediately drops her act, restraining Pelagius for judgment before Arslan. Despite his capture, Pelagius remains defiant, attempting to accuse Pharangus and Jaswant of conspiracy. His protests are silenced when Give returns with the documented evidence of his embezzlement, leading Arslan to immediately strip him of his viceroy status. Arslan orders the return of 200,000 silver pieces to Gilan's citizens. During the distribution, Shagad reveals his true nature to Elam and Narcissus, expressing disapproval of both the wealth redistribution and Narcissus' loyalty to Arslan. When Narcissus mentions their investigation into the pirates and their informant, suggesting someone must be providing ship schedules to the raiders, Shagad dismissively frames it as natural business competition. Their ideological clash leads Narcissus to privately express gratitude to Elam for not having sent him to Gilan earlier. The situation escalates when 20 pirate ships approach Gilan, their captain dismissing warnings about Daryon and Arslan's formidable group. Narcissus' strategic brilliance shines as he releases the city's dam, creating an artificial current to push the pirates offshore. Jeev then coordinates an attack using oil-filled logs, setting multiple ships ablaze. Grays' fleet engages the remaining vessels, while Daryon's fearsome reputation paralyzes the pirates' will to fight. Despite their captain's attempts to maintain order, his crew's morale crumbles before Darian's challenge to surrender. After their capture and imprisonment, the mystery of the pirates' information source is finally revealed when Shagad visits the dungeon to berate the captain for disobeying orders, exposing himself as the traitor who had been aiding the pirates all along. Lusitania's grip on power began weakening 6 months after capturing Ecbatana. Daily necessities like food and water became scarce, and the situation deteriorated further after Bodin's departure from the capital. Seeking revenge against Guiscard, Bodin orchestrated a secret mission with his remaining knights to destroy the capital's water supply. The successful operation left the city's inhabitants facing severe drought and famine. In June 321 AD, Guiscard, who had imprisoned his incompetent brother Innocentus and taken control as Pars's king, struggled with mounting civil unrest from both Partian citizens and Lusitanian soldiers. One June day, Guiscard discovered his own guards planning to slaughter the Partians. Recognizing this would harm his interests, he ordered these revenge-seeking soldiers banished. He also commanded his men to urge the Partians to hasten the aqueduct repairs to restore normalcy. Just another typical day in Guiscard's rule. Meanwhile, Étoile wandered the palace outskirts, contemplating her situation, Arslan, and the refugees she'd brought to the capital. A piece of cloth suddenly fell on her head, and she looked up to find Innocentus peering from his prison window. Recognizing her as a choir, he asked her to tell Guiscard about his imprisonment, unaware that his own brother had put him there. After hearing this, Étoile hurried back to the city, planning to speak with Guiscard privately. Observing the suffering people around her, she remembered Arslan's parting words. She took 4 gold coins to buy food for the people, wondering why a non-believer like Arslan showed more concern for the people than her own people did. As night falls, Étoile attempts to sneak into the royal palace and cause some mischief to gain an audience with the king. During this time, Guiscard's soldiers capture Irina and inform him. Guiscard visits Irina in her tower prison and requests a private conversation. During their talk, he reveals his true identity to her. Upon learning that her country's attacker stands before her, Irina becomes deeply distressed and attempts to kill him. Guiscard pushes her away and departs. Meanwhile, her people imprisoned in the Pars dungeons strategize ways to rescue their princess. Alfarid's elder brother, a member of Irina's entourage, manages to escape the dungeon and sets out to save her. On his way down from Irina's chamber, Guiscard learns about Étoile's intrusion into the palace and her request for a private audience. He agrees to meet her, and she informs him about King Innocentus's imprisonment. Guiscard cleverly deceives her, making her believe Innocentus is lying. After his meeting with the squire, Guiscard and his associate devise a sinister plan to execute that very night. Guiscard orchestrates a plan, allowing Étoile to lead Innocentus to Irina's room, knowing Irina harbors hatred toward him as the king whose kingdom slaughtered her people. He anticipates Irina will use her knife to kill the king, thus eliminating his troublesome older brother. The plan partially succeeds. Irina does stab Innocentus, but his large belly's fat layer prevents the wound from being fatal. News of the assassination attempt spreads quickly, and Guiscard becomes furious upon learning of his brother's survival. He storms out of the hospital and orders the execution of both Étoile and Irina to cover up the crime. As the execution begins, Alfarid's elder brother stands ready to shoot the executioner if necessary. Irina, accepting her fate, prays for safe passage to rejoin her family. Just before she's set ablaze, Hims and his soldiers arrive, swiftly rescuing her. When Guiscard demands to know why Hims would save someone like Irina, Hims remains silent, simply taking her and departing. Meanwhile, Alfarid's brother rescues Étoile and takes her to a balcony. During their conversation, he reveals his identity as Alfarid's elder brother, shocking Étoile, who recognizes the name. Upon learning his sister serves under Arslan, he decides to head to Gilan, with Étoile following to share important information. In Gilan, Arslan and his companions interrogate their captured pirate captain, discovering information about a treasure island holding millions in gold coins. Though somewhat unsettled by this news, they consider leaving Gilan to claim the treasure for themselves. After gathering crucial information from the pirate captain, Arslan and his party set sail from Gilan in pursuit of the treasure. However, their departure triggered Shagad's devious plan. Under the cover of darkness, he smuggled a force of 3,500 pirates into the city and informed them of the prince's absence. Shagad assured the pirates that the now defenseless city was theirs to plunder and instructed them to storm the viceroy's building, taking it by force. Unaware of Narcissus' reputation as a master tactician, Shagad overestimated his own cunning. The pirates spread across the city, looting at will and freeing their captured comrades from the dungeons, mocking the prince's efforts while bolstering their numbers. Meanwhile, deep within the viceroy's building, Arslan had secretly left a contingent behind to defend the city. Elam and Alfarid, stationed on the walls, waited patiently for the pirates to draw closer. As soon as they were within range, a barrage of arrows rained down upon them. The pirates retaliated, firing back their own arrows in a fierce exchange. The chaos momentarily subsided when Shagad appeared, revealing himself as the mastermind behind the attack. His selfish betrayal enraged Elam and Alfarid, who openly condemned his actions. Unfazed, Shagad dismissed their words and ordered his men to breach the doors. Just as the pirates advanced, the sound of approaching reinforcements echoed through the streets. Narcissus arrived with his army, bolstered by the formidable Zot clan. He commended Elam and Alfarid for their resilience, and immediately launched a counteroffensive, seeking retribution against Shagad for his treachery. Arslan, learning of Narcissus' return, joined the fray, rallying his men to fight harder. Jaswant, Grays, and the others engaged the pirates, pillaging the city, driving them back. Meanwhile, Give inspired the city's commoners to rise up and defend their freedom. The tide of battle turned against the pirates as the combined forces overwhelmed them. Shagad, cornered by Narcissus, expressed frustration at being kept in the dark about the true plans. Narcissus calmly revealed that he had anticipated Shagad's betrayal from the start. Before the confrontation could escalate, Daryun appeared, forcing Shagad to flee. Shagad darted through the city streets, evading capture as he made his way to a waiting ship. Narcissus pursued him relentlessly and managed to board the ship just before it set sail. As the ship drifted into the open sea, Narcissus confronted Shagad. Their swords clashed in a fierce duel, while their respective men battled around them. Back on the dock, Daryun and Grays quickly organized a ship to chase after Shagad's vessel, determined to end his treachery once and for all. On board Shagad's ship, Shagad questioned Narcissus about how and when he had uncovered his plans to betray him. Calmly, Narcissus revealed that he had known from the very beginning. Frustrated, Shagad demanded to know why Narcissus had returned at such a critical time. Narcissus responded resolutely, explaining that his life now revolved around protecting Arslan, someone he deeply believed in. Regret filled Shagad's heart as their fight continued, but neither backed down. A short while later, Daryun and his party boarded the ship, swiftly engaging Shagad's men in combat. Daryun cleared the deck of enemies to relieve Narcissus of his burden, allowing him to focus on his personal battle. Meanwhile, Narcissus paused his duel to discuss Arslan's vision with Shagad, trying to reason with his old friend. However, their fight resumed, and Shagad attempted to gain an unfair advantage, pinning Narcissus down. Just then, Azrael the Hawk swooped in and distracted Shagad, giving Narcissus the opening he needed to incapacitate his opponent with a decisive strike. By morning, Shagad and his men were captured and brought before Arslan for judgment. As the prisoners were led to the court, Alfarid ran to Narcissus, praising him for his victory. Moments later, Shagad was made to sit and hear Arslan's decision. Instead of ordering his execution, Arslan sentenced him to 1 year as a slave, selling him to a cruel master. The punishment would force Shagad to toil in the fields and live the life of a slave, ensuring he understood the suffering he had inflicted on others. Despite this humiliating verdict, Shagad boldly vowed to return one day and exact his revenge on Arslan. Daryun approached him, issuing a stern warning that any attempt to harm the prince would result in his swift end. However, Arslan intervened, calming Daryun and addressing Shagad directly. He told him that if he truly possessed the wisdom Narcissus once admired, he might develop compassion during his punishment. Shagad frowned deeply, his pride shaken by Arslan's words. After the hearing, Narcissus stepped onto a balcony, lost in thought about his new reality. Elam joined him, offering comforting advice and reminding him of the brighter future they were fighting for. Their conversation ended as Narcissus spotted a rainbow in the sky, a symbol of hope following the storm. In the aftermath of their victory, several wealthy men from Gilan came forward to pledge their support for Arslan and his cause. With this newfound backing, Arslan launched an assault on the pirates' base of operations, capturing all remaining outlaws. To honor the bravery of the Zot clan, Arslan awarded them a banner, solidifying their loyalty and uplifting their spirits. By nightfall, Etoile and Alfarid's brother arrived in Gilan. Overcome with emotion, Etoile knelt before Arslan, pleading for his help to save Innocentus from his cruel brother, Guiscard. The next chapter of their journey loomed ahead, with Arslan's resolve stronger than ever. After learning about Guiscard's cruelty toward his older brother in Ecbatana, Arslan finds himself in a moral dilemma, unsure of what to do next. Meanwhile, in Ecbatana, Guiscard commands his men to eliminate his brother Innocentus and locate Hilmes, the Silver Mask. Not long after, Guiscard's soldiers uncover Hilmes' location and launch an attack. However, Hilmes, ever vigilant, fends off the assault and dispatches Guiscard's forces before they can overpower him. Joined by Sam and Xande, he makes a swift escape to Zabul, strategizing his next move. Back in Gilan, Etoile fervently pleads with Arslan to save Innocentus from Guiscard's tyranny. Jeev, true to his nature, makes a few sarcastic remarks, mocking Etoile's intelligence, but Ferrangis quickly intervenes, silencing him and reminding him to show respect. Amid the tension, Alpharid bursts into the room and freezes at the sight of her older brother, Merlane. Terrified, she darts around the room, evading his attempts to confront her. Merlane chases her, questioning why she refuses to accept her role as the next chief of the Zot clan. Alpharid firmly declares she has no interest in leading the clan, surprising Narcissus and the others with her defiance. Once the commotion settles, Arslan officially welcomes Merlane and asks for any information he might have about the palace. Merlane reveals that Guiscard is actively pursuing Hilmes. At this revelation, Alpharid's eyes flare with anger as she informs everyone that Hilmes was the one who murdered their father. Merlane, filled with regret, laments letting Hilmes escape, though it's clear he was powerless against him. At Peshawar Fortress, King Andragoras and Queen Tahamane rally the soldiers, preparing for an assault on the Lusitanians in Ecbatana. This sudden decision leaves both Kishward and Kubard uneasy. Kubard tries to calm Kishward, advising him to accept Andragoras' authority. As they walk together, Kishward asks Kubard why he abandoned the battlefield in the past. Kubard vaguely replies, hinting that he simply didn't want to die at the hands of the enemy. Kishward smiles at the cryptic answer and lets his friend leave. Later that evening, the wind blows a secret message into Kishward's room, the letter that Variz had sent to Bahman. Kishward picks up the scroll and begins reading it, but before he can absorb its contents, Queen Tahamane enters and demands the letter. Reluctantly, he hands it over. Soon after, Kishward is summoned to meet with the king and queen. Andragoras and Tahamane commend him for surrendering the letter without hesitation. In a dramatic display, Andragoras takes the letter with his sword and burns it to ash, ensuring its contents remain hidden. As Kishward is dismissed, Andragoras offers vague reassurances, but they do little to ease his concerns. On his way back, Kishward reflects on the secret he glimpsed in the letter and begins to worry about Arslan's safety, fearing the implications of what he's just witnessed. The next day, Etoile arranged a meeting with Arslan and his advisors. Desperately, he pleaded for their help in saving his king and defeating Guiscard, promising that, in return, the Lusitanian army would leave the royal capital, restoring it to its rightful owners. While Narcissus and the others were willing to fight to reclaim their land, they harbored doubts about the sincerity of Etoile's words. As Arslan wrestled with the decision, Elam burst into his office, reporting that Andragoras' army was already marching toward Ecbatana to reclaim the capital. Meanwhile, Baudin, leading his Templar army, unveiled the sword of Ruknabad to the remaining followers of Yaldabaoth. Using it as a symbol, he urged them to rise against the Parsians, claiming that they had been forsaken by the heavens. Setting the sword down dramatically, Bodin chuckled smugly at his own plan. However, his schemes were short-lived. Hilmes, having tracked Bodin's whereabouts, stormed into the temple with his loyal comrades, Xande and Sam. Caught off guard, Baudin attempted to confront Hilmes, but quickly realized his power was no match for him. Retreating to his men, Baudin commanded them to protect him, but Hilmes' sheer strength overwhelmed them. After driving away Baudin and his forces, Hilmes raised his sword high, signaling his ambition to ascend the throne. Back in Gilan, Arslan declared his intentions to his allies. He resolved to march toward Ecbatana and join the battle to reclaim Pars, not just for their kingdom, but also to extend a hand of mercy to the honorable Lusitanians. Though their forces were not as strong as before, Arslan's resolve inspired confidence among his followers. Outside the room, Etoile overheard Arslan's discussion. Once the meeting ended, he was brought inside, where Arslan vowed to prevent his father from ascending the throne, regardless of the cost. Moved by Arslan's compassion, Etoile knelt in gratitude, thanking him for his willingness to help. As the armies converged on Ecbatana, Andragoras and his forces clashed with Guiscard's men in a fierce battle, swords raised high amidst the chaos. On the outskirts of the royal capital, Arslan and his army arrived, their spirits ignited by the sight of their homeland. Standing tall, Arslan rallied his soldiers, urging them to fight with all their might, even if it meant their last breath. With renewed vigor, they marched forward, determined to seize victory and reclaim their kingdom.